when a woman wants to abort suddenly, life becomes very sacrosanct. So I think it will be interesting to hear what people think about this subject. Is it really necessary for we to curtail the freedom of women to choose what they want with their bodies? And if at all we are entitled to do this, what kind of arguments do we use?
Let me put a twist in that story. It is okay. We think we should curtail women for whatever, for abortion and stuff, what they do with their body. What about other things? Should we curtail men, for example, what they do with their body? I know we don't do it, but if you think about it sensibly, if we are curtailing women because, well, the babies are human beings, can't we also say effectively sperms are potential human beings, so we should curtail men from masturbating?
Not just masturbating, eh? I just think that any man who impregnates a woman that he does not intend to marry should go to jail.
Why has marriage come into
how do you know if someone intends to marry you or not?
It doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter. You see, like with this whole abortion things, they say family life, blah, blah, blah. But I think men get away with it so easier. But for them to understand the gravity of the issue, it's like the moment a man decides to have one unprotected sex with a woman, that man is breaking the law because he's creating potential life. You know? And number two, it even gets like, you know, like then you have assault and then like you assault causing grievous harm, then there's actual bodily harm. So when you actually, like the woman gets pregnant and these people are just like in just that casual relationship, they're not even getting married, that man should even face life in imprisonment.
I think the man can say when I was impregnating her, I had the intention of marrying her, but I have now changed my mind.
Exactly. So as long as a woman is pregnant, you don't even have that option of changing.
Okay,
you either choose.
That would be hard to enforce or even try. But
what do you mean hard? If I'm pregnant, of course. How hard is it for me to prove that there's some guy and he's telling me he has a wife?
I'm talking about people's intentions, but if we are saying that if you impregnate someone, then you should be with them or all that. I mean, for me, I think I'm indifferent to it, but I'd be pro such a legislation just because I don't know, I want to see kids growing up with both parents around, but other than that, I will be indifferent to such a situation. But to respond,
digress a bit, aka you've just mentioned kids growing up with both parents, and we know a lot of situations where two-parent families actually lead to more strife and bad upbringing for the kid.
Yeah. I don't know.
So when you go that direction, I have a problem.
Yeah, I think I was working with like a perfect scenario where you assume that if both parents are available, then the kid is gonna grow up good. But anyway, I think I'd leave that for, I don't know, parents to be to worry about. For me, I will be indifferent to things like those.
Okay, just to give you something else to worry about when you talk about both parents, you haven't specified the gender of these both parents. Because you have had interesting studies showing that same-sex relationships tend to be quite stable in comparison to their heterosexual relationships. But of course, these things are not standard across the board. But there are instances where you find same-sex relationships being far more stable, having less strife and lasting longer than, and actually, consequently, being far much better for children rather than the standard heterosexual family.
I think in 2020, you have to worry about a lot. Or when you say something, you have to worry, did I refer to him when he doesn't want to be referred to as him? Or you forgot about the homosexuals, or it's a lot. So I think to sum it all up, I just say like the best situation for the kid. I think that would cover for all of that. But beyond that, I wouldn't. I think that's another topic to discuss about raising children and all that.
So to avoid all that, isn't it better to let people abort when they do not want to have the children?
Yeah, actually, that's what I was going to speak about, because of course I'm pro-choice. I mean, I'm pro-choice to very radical levels, but I don't think that will come out tonight. I don't know, you made a comment about curtailing men's freedoms. I don't know if that will be another thing that is even possible to enforce, because I mean, if I could be masturbating right now for all you know. Yeah, though I promise I'm not such a freak.
The same thing applies to abortions anyway.
Yeah. I'm thinking for abortions, it's probably easier because you could control how people access some services. And that's why you'd find if it's hard to procure these services, some people just opt to have the children. So I think that's the biggest problem with, or rather that's the excuse me. That's the biggest thing about controlling such a thing as preservation of life for these unborn children. But in another scenario, I don't think we'd be able to control what men do with their seed and sperm and all that. So I think it's easier to control women in this case.
Okay, maybe I missed what you said, but in 12 months, a woman is only capable of getting pregnant once. But in 12 months, a man is capable of impregnating 365 women.
That is an underestimate.
Yeah, it could be higher. Like it could be higher. So why is it easier to control women?
Because you'll deny them access to the services they need. Because I'm assuming
the person who's at risk of increasing population is not me as a woman.
Yeah, it's the man, but I'm saying because a woman needs a special kind of, I don't know, service or drug to do what they need to. I don't assume abortions are just as easy as drinking some water and it works. I'm saying it's easier to have a say on being pro-life because you can just deny the women who want to access these services.
But again, just because you are denying them doesn't mean they don't procure those services.
Yeah, I'm saying it's a factor in helping to control it because they can't access it easily. There's some difficulty. I mean, just I'll use an example of piracy. If you have a strong policy against piracy, you can control it to a certain level, but that doesn't mean that there isn't other avenues that someone might, use to pirate content and all that. So it's the same thing with what I'm saying about abortion. But I'm not saying that now you'll be totally in a position to stop it or control it. I'm just saying you'll make it more controllable. because I think that's the case. Like we hear about many places where someone procured an abortion, but because it wasn't a proper method or a safe method, certain complications came up. But if it was open, I think then everyone, or rather you can access it easily as just going to buy medication for a headache.
And I think that's how it should be.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, I was just saying, I was explaining how I think it's easier to control a woman's body in this situation.
I think it's easy because of the patriarchal, system that has been in place. Not that it is scientifically easier to control a woman's body than to control a man's. It's the other way around. In fact, women are biologically a little bit more complicated than men are. And when a woman gets pregnant, it's already the worst case scenario. If the point was to, prevent abortions, it's not supposed to get there. It's way easier for what's it called, a family planning program to be successful when it focuses on men than when it focuses on women, because men generally, our sexual habits, we have many things socially that make us the best target for family planning programs. It is just that the systems, the way they have been over time, they have put women on the spotlight on this issue, and they have been forced to carry the burden of the side effects and all these things. Otherwise, I'm just finding out. Otherwise, in the next 20 years, after these new male contraceptives have been rolled out, you'll find that they are actually being used more than the female type of contraceptive.
Yeah, I agree with you. It will be easier to do that. But I'm an advocate for that, and that's why I don't know, encourage more men to take charge of family planning methods. But I'm saying, because of this case that a woman has already gotten pregnant, it's easier to preserve that life because you have ways to prevent that woman from accessing services to cut off that life. That's what I was saying.
Given that some of those services can be
specialized.
Yeah. No, some of them are not specialized. I mean, at certain ages, certain levels of development, some of these services can be self-administered.
Exactly.
For such, and then, well, assuming the woman has that knowledge, but generally speaking, I don't know.
Well, for me, what I saw when I was in campus was that I finally understood that if somebody wants an abortion, they're going to get it. It doesn't matter whether it is legal or illegal. There's a lot of information on how to procure an abortion. Other than like going to a doctor, I think even for us in our African society, we had ways of inducing this premature labor.
I need to mute some people.
So from that time, I actually came to understand why it is better to provide a safe space for those people who don't want to carry a pregnancy to abort. Because in campus, I remember there was in our first week of reporting as freshers, there's this girl who came to school pregnant, but she knew she didn't want to be pregnant. So she used those herbs, blah, blah, blah. And her room was like... why you do it? It's because
you look down. Hey, Mohammed.
Yes, Alex.
Have the time to have discussion with your family when the microphone is on.
My apologies. I had left the microphone on.
Okay.
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay.
It's fine. So,
but this is an interesting discussion. I'm enjoying it very much.
So from what I learned back then was that you cannot force a woman to carry pregnancy that they don't want. It doesn't matter whether it is legal or illegal. And of all those girls that I knew that had an abortion, as in I never saw anyone take the extra step of going to report and say, like, I know so and so was pregnant and they just had an abortion. So for me, I think like criminalizing things like abortion is an exercise in futility, because it doesn't really work.
I think it does. And when you are saying that you feel that if someone really wants it, they'll get it, I agree that to a certain degree. But I feel the fact that it's illegal kind of works on some people. Like they really want to procure an abortion, but since they feel it's illegal, then maybe they change their minds. But I know for some, maybe if they are strong-willed, they will go ahead and get it. But for some also, they'll have to change their mind and live with the fact that here I am, so I better get used to being soon to be mother.
As in, like, I remember when I was in third year, I had a campus roommate who had an abortion, and she was like 8 months pregnant. So in my mind, like, I was so upset about it because I thought that was like a fully developed kid who can survive, independent of the mother under the right conditions. But this woman felt that this girl, because, like, she was still a young girl, she couldn't become a mother at that age. And she induced it and she went and, her life moved on. I don't think illegality, the only person the only person I know who's kept a child is because they went home, told their parents they were pregnant, and their parents told them, if you do not carry that kid to term, then don't come back to this house. But otherwise, they were never threatened that if you carry an abortion, I'm going to report you so that you go to jail. So I think the decision of keeping a child is never based on whether I'm going to go to jail or not.
Well, I still maintain that to some it is, but to others, maybe it won't deter them. And I don't know, I'm happy that the one who did it at 8 months actually did it, because I believe you can do it at any time as long as the kid is not out of your womb, but do it at least in a safe way for your sake.
Think
But for
about it.
me,
Think about it. When you use the legal argument, maybe if we ignore abortion specifically, and I look at the number of things that have been illegal, where being illegal in itself has not stopped them happening. America is famous for having an experiment in the prohibition, where America became a country where they banned alcohol and related products. And I think some of the old presidents became rich because of that ban, by the illegality, instead of actually stopping the act, actually probably increased the amount of drinks that came in even through the black market. If we look at countries where we have laws on blasphemy, which have been there for several years in some places, this is, again, has never been an issue to stop people. It doesn't look, I don't think making something illegal in itself as enough of a deterrent to stop it. I mean, Kenya alone, if you look at abortion, which is illegal, until recently it was even illegal even if there were medical reasons. But the number of abortions that have happened over the years, I mean, Ruth is saying she was a student when these things happened. That was the other day. When I was a student, these things used to happen. And that time it was even illegal, to the point where you didn't even have an option of a medical reason to induce an abortion. still wasn't a good enough reason to stop people. In fact, quite a number of famous doctors who probably made their money from abortion.
Maybe
I don't.
Okay, just allow me to.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Throw a spanner in the works. So, why abortion is interesting is actually how big of an issue it is. For me, that's why it's one of the reasons why when we talk about freedom, I jump right to it. So, if you look at old WHO statistics, like from 2014, during during that time when around 60 million abortions were being carried out each year. This is, just to put this number into context, that's like a quarter of all pregnancies in the world ended up in abortion. And the more interesting fact about this statistic is, if you look at countries where abortion is criminalized, where the women's freedom to choose has been taken away from them, and you compare these countries with more progressive countries where a woman can just walk into any hospital and say, I would like to perform an abortion safely. And you look at the number of abortions being performed per 1,000 women in these countries, the numbers are almost identical. That means the criminalization of abortion does not reduce the number of abortions that occur in these countries. So it means that if a woman wants to have an abortion, she's definitely going to get it. And on average, all the women who want abortions tend to go and get it. So in a country where their freedom has been curtailed, that is where you get now, mortality due to abortions. Now, the numbers start speaking for themselves. Like, for example, in developing countries, 90% of women across the world who develop complications during abortions develop these complications in developing countries, and it is in these developing countries where it has been criminalized. And an overwhelming majority of deaths due to abortion occur in these countries. So this is a clear instance where giving people more freedom is actually good for them rather than taking it away.
Ruth, you had something to say?
I agree with Via. And in addition to what he's saying, I think there's normally a misconception that if you want to procure an abortion, it's because, number one, you're unmarried or young. And yet, stats show that the people who actually procure abortions, even if you go to marriage stops here in Kenya, most of the people who procure abortions are in marriage. Like, you already have your 2 or 3 kids, and then you're here thinking, no, I don't want a 4th child, I don't want a 5th child, I don't want a 6th child. So most of the people who seek these services are actually in relationships, which are long-term. So I believe this illegalization is more based on, number one, patriarchy, because we want to control what women do, and number two, religion. These people believe that life is sacred, but at the same time, like, they believe the death penalty is okay. So you're here wondering, okay, if life is sacred, that if I become pregnant, I have to give birth, then what? Then what happens after that? And yet, if not everybody who becomes pregnant wants to be a mother. If a woman gives birth and goes and puts the newborn baby in a dustbin, that woman is still vilified. So which is better? To have this kid aborted at, is it 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks? Or let this kid be eaten by dogs in a dustbin? So what's better?
I think I should set the record straight first. Of course, I am pro-choice. In fact, I am an antinatalist, so I think that will maybe make people get what I'm saying. My point was, of course, I get that. The more you tell people that it's okay to want to do this and that, the easier it is for you to manage certain situations, the easier it is for you to avoid cases of people dying when they were procuring abortions. But my point was, I feel that to some extent, the fact that you've made something illegal in a way, or a certain percentage of it, you are able to control it. Not that I am pro controlling what people do with their bodies and all that, but I'm saying that if you have laws or regulations against something, then it's probably going to affect the numbers of certain fringe cases. I know there's a lot of cases of abortions. In fact, I even get confessions from my peers and all that about how something happened and abortion was like they procured abortion whichever which way they had to. But I'm just saying, for a certain demographic, you find that the fact that this thing is illegal, they are not going to pursue it even if they wanted to, or rather they had second thoughts about procuring that abortion. I don't know if that's clear now.
Yeah, I think it's clear.
Yeah.
Just to expand the subject a little, I noticed something interesting. So, although in Kilifi and in Nairobi, sometimes it gets really hot, it's very rare for you to find men walking around in the streets without shirts. Most would wear vests, but it's not common to find a group of men walking around shirtless. But it's quite common here. Especially now when these people have their 3 months of sunshine, they really like making use of it. And you'd find grown men with big bellies walking around going to supermarkets without shirts or vests. But not even one woman would grant us the luxury. Even though it's not like they are more resilient to high temperatures. you will never, and I haven't, unless it is in, actually I don't know. I have not seen even a single woman exercise her liberty the way men exercise their liberty of enjoying the sun. So I always wonder, is it that women also just want to curtail their own freedoms themselves? Is there this psychological thing that despite what the society may allow, especially this being a very liberal society, they just decide to restrict their own freedoms themselves while men just walk around and, enjoy the sun?
I think it will be unfair. Like, I don't think we've evolved to such a point where we'll be very respectful to women who are walking topless. So I think that's the reason, rather than, yeah, of course, technically speaking, they are curtailing their own freedom, but it's maybe due to other societal circumstances, because I'd imagine the cases of harassment will go up in this age if you just met a woman walking around topless.
This is a society where two men can kiss in public.
I know, but it's still a society where people get assaulted, sexually harassed. So
it barely happens here. That's why it's a peculiarity. You see, I would expect it. Yeah, where we have many cases of women facing violence even for wearing skirts. But you see, when you're in a society where people have an LGBT month, and you're allowed to, in fact, this month, June, is an LGBTQ awareness month. Yeah. You live in a society where people have LGBT coffee sessions. You expect that a woman in such a society should be allowed to enjoy the sun.
I think its time just hasn't come yet, but maybe we're getting there. That's what I think. But that would be a good one.
Before we get into that, let me hear Ruth.
Well, like when it comes to walking topless, it depends. You see, like if you go to before colonization, as African women, like for me, I grew up knowing boobs are just boobs. Like I still am at pains to understand why like showing boobs in public is considered like a big deal. Because I grew up where breastfeeding was normal. Like you'd go in a matatu and somebody would be like breastfeeding their kid. And right now, people you see are so conscious about like they are covering themselves while feeding their kids. If you go to places like Turkana, people are walking topless all the time. It's not a big deal. So I think it's that sexualization. But that's aside. When it comes to criminalization of stuff, I don't think it works as a deterrent in some instances, unless the consequence is so, what's the word? When I get the word, I'll tell you.
Grave.
So,
Grave.
No.
Oh, okay.
She's looking for the legal term, probably.
For example, in Kenya, you can go to jail for being blasphemous, right?
Mm-hmm.
But has that stopped Kenyans from being blasphemous?
No, but on the other hand, look at it that in Kenya you can also go in jail for what is called public nudity.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, we don't see that.
The other thing you can go to jail in Kenya is bigamy. How many people do you know?
Oh.
Yes, it's bigamy legal in Kenya.
That one is only when you're married. Okay, it's no longer legal. It used to be legal when you were married only under the African Christian Marriage Act, which was repealed.
Yeah, but
so I don't know whether
but either way, when you in Kenya, if you're married under the civil, if you have a civil marriage, you're presumed to be monogamous. If you're married under the Christian marriage, you're presumed to be monogamous. If you're married under Hindu law, you're presumed to be monogamous. So any person who's married under these three instances, if they go and do rorashio or whichever traditional ceremony for another woman, they should be charged with bigamy. But in Kenya, how many people have been charged with bigamy since even
but I think with the change of the law, that was not
no, it has not been repealed. So yes, because the only people who are potentially polygamous is if you're marrying under African customary marriage and under Islamic law. Otherwise, if you're married under civil law, you are a monogamous marriage. If you're marrying under Christian law, you are monogamous. If you're marrying under Hindu law, you're monogamous. So,
I feel like enforcement of some things, either it's going to be an expensive endeavor, or it's just not worth it.
Criminal law is not at your expense. It's at the expense of the state. All you have to go
exactly. That's why I'm saying it will be an expensive endeavor for the government.
How?
So
it is their job. Like we pay tax so that they can enforce this law.
Well, I'm sure the government also takes on other expensive projects that they feel is going to benefit them, but I don't think going around trying to see if people are monogamous and all that is worth their energy, especially in a society like ours.
But anyway, my point is, has the threat of being prosecuted in a court of law prevented a man or a woman getting into an extramarital affair that is that serious?
I don't think in our society it does, but I think in the US that worked.
even in the US, you get that despite all these laws, I think you have this, for them, they take freedom of religion very seriously, yeah? And for that reason, you have this, in fact, I think there's even a series called Sister Wives after these Americans who are polygamous.
Yeah. There's also another show called Big Love or something. But I think for them, how they manage their societies is quite different, because for us, I mean, probably even the guy who's supposed to be enforcing that law is the polygamous one. Or having, I just think on certain matters, we can't enforce such things. I mean, they say being homosexual, no, engaging in sexual acts against the order of nature or something like that is illegal. I mean, how are you gonna police people around? How are you going to enforce such things?
Yeah, they say that is targeted towards like homosexuals in Kenya. It was upheld. Was it early this year that it is legal? Like, and guys were like, okay, what is the order of nature? Tell us.
You shouldn't go down someone. Shouldn't put fingers inside someone. I don't know, but I'm just saying such will be hard to enforce.
Actually, getting a blowjob is against the order of nature.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hello.
If we have to go all the way. However, let me try and get you back to where we started from. Yes, we've looked at abortion, we've looked at sexuality, and we've seen how they are. The question we are asking is this: should we curtail freedoms, either to act or to speak? And if we do, what criteria do we use?
Hello.
Can I come in and talk?
Okay. I think Mohammed wants to talk.
No, I think it's Kilonzi. Kilonzi?
Yeah. Hi guys. Okay. This is my first time here.
Okay.
So in pre-thinkers, so I just wanted to just talk on that point where should we curtail those freedoms? My personal opinion is that such freedoms should belong to individuals. They should not be policed by any other person. That's my opinion. I think you can continue.
I wanted to add something about this order of nature thing. So
may I share a small point?
Yes, please.
I think in the terms of freedom, that's a very interesting and dangerous thing to actually consider. If you consider it on a logical extreme, what I mean is, if you think about freedom as the individual, obviously no human being wants to be limited in their capacity to do what they want and how they want to express themselves. But as we know, in any society, can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Okay. As we know, in any society that we live in, we know that we are not alone. And we create...
Let me block this for a while. Kennedy.
Who's that making noise?
That's Kennedy.
Yeah.
No, that's Kennedy.
Carry on.
So as we know, we have to differentiate, first of all, individual freedoms versus how they impact society. Obviously, we know that when we are talking about the individual, we always desire maximum expression and minimum limitations on their freedoms. But the way we relate to society sometimes forces us to limit those freedoms. And sometimes, and actually most of the time, it's not for the good of the individual, rather the good of the society. This is sometimes created, the values of the society dictates what freedoms will be limited, what freedoms will be expressed, and so on. So if we are talking about freedom as itself, we need to differentiate it. We need to separate it from society as it exists. because sometimes you might do something that you think it's your right, it's your freedom, but you are infringing on the right of someone else. The idea of freedom is something that honestly fascinates me a little bit. And thank you. That's what I wanted to share.
Mohammed, before you stop sharing, you brought up something interesting about society and separating freedoms of individual from the society. First of all, in my opinion, and I may be wrong, to have freedoms in society, you would think, I'll put it to you this way. Is it that freedoms come from society down to the individuals, or are we looking at freedoms coming from the individuals and then into the greater society? Which defines the other? Is it the individuals who define the society, or the society which defines the limitations of the individuals? And if it is so, should that be the case?
I think the most important thing we need to understand is that most actually people assume that freedoms they trickle upwards from the individual to the society. But what I have noticed is reality conflicts with that theory, simply because all of the freedoms that we try to create for the individuals, these are how I think the best way I can put it is like a safe ground a society is trying to create for the individual to express themselves with limitations, and we call that freedom. So at the end of the day, what we consider freedom essentially is not seen in anywhere in any society, in my honest opinion. Reason being, if we were to talk about complete and absolute freedom, no one will be listening to the government. No one will be listening to any higher authority. That will mean that there will be no religion. That will mean that there will be no governing body. But it's because we live in a society that it forces us to surrender some of those rights. It is not an ideal situation, but for the purposes of harmony and peace in society, sometimes compromises are created. I'm not saying that this is the best case scenario. I will give an example of the so-called free country, America today. In the guise of freedom, they are showing the world that they are the most illiterate in terms of how much they want to express freedom, to the point sometimes it infringes on each other. The reason why I bring this up is because it's the country that claims to uphold the values of freedom. I am conflicted because, one, there's a way reality is, and there's a way we idealize life as it should be, as you know, the idealized utopic version. That is where we find complete and true freedom. But in the world we live in where we have to listen to the government, where we have to listen to religious leaders and so on, we are forced to surrender some of our freedoms. And sometimes those freedoms that we surrender may be the most crucial. And we are left with just stuck with what little we have. That's what I think. I don't know if I have answered your question.
No, sort of, but there's probably one small extra thing you probably missed out. In this case, based upon that, we'll come up to the second question of our whole conversation. What determines these limits? Where do you put the limits? Because if you look at it from society, in your case, yes, you're saying, because society, in fact, the way you're putting it is that society defines what you're allowed to be freedom.
Absolutely.
Based upon the ideal that society claims of trying to make people free. So here the question is, given within these limits of these societies, what defines where is the limit? What should we have as the limits actually?
Isn't that
ideal reality?
Isn't that though, if you think about it, isn't that what we have done in history? We have created laws and we call those laws divine laws. That is where we created the ideas of religion. We also created other authorities that either create or limit our freedoms, such as governments.
Mm-hmm.
I think the question should not be where our limit should be, but rather what should our freedoms be. Like, what I'm trying to say is, as it stands right now, what are the individual rights and freedoms that no one can curtail, no one can put a limit on for a healthy and happy life? If we think about it from that perspective, we are able to create a sort of a list. I think that is a better approach, because if we think about the sources of freedom, most likely we will always come back to a circle, back and forth. And that circle being, it's a bounce off between an individual crying for freedom and a government that is promising, and I put that in quotes, freedoms by limiting their individuals' ability to exercise their freedom. So at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, disregarding everything else, what specific freedoms and rights does an individual need to thrive in the world, to be happy and to be fulfilled? I think that's a best starting ground.
That's such a very nice point. Ruth, okay, you have your hand up?
Yeah. When you ask like where do our freedoms come from? Is it from individual? Is it from society? Yeah.
Mm.
And there's this thing like I remember I taught a long time ago. It was called the social contract theory, where the theory is that we as a society, we decide that, you know what, we are going to create this ruling class. I forget what it was called, but the gist of the social contract theory is that the general society surrenders its rights to this ruling class, who decide what are the rules to live by in society. And now this ruling class is the one that comes out what is right, what is wrong, and what rules to live by. For example, if we decide to live by absolute freedom, what is natural, yeah? There's this thing that not everything everything can be natural, but not like all things can be natural, but not all things that are natural are good. And that's why you have rules to live by. For example, you'll find that if it's natural to be attracted to children, however, society has discovered that when you have a person who is an adult entering into relations with a child, it's not good for the child. So we come up with rules that if you as a person who's an adult is attracted to a child, then there's something wrong with you and you make it illegal. And that's why you get that if you look at how the treatment of pedophilia has gone, it's gone from treating it from outright criminal and disgusting to treating it as a mental problem. And what is natural? Natural means that you are born with it. The same way the way gay people come and say that I was born gay, I can't help it that I'm attracted to people of my own gender, is the same argument that pedophiles would use, that I can't help it. There's nothing I can, like, no matter what I do, the person that I'm sexually attracted to is children. However, that people, when it comes to homosexuality, people are like, okay, fine. If you're attracted to your own gender, you guys are adults of sound mind and consenting, it's fine. But if you're an adult who is attracted to children, they bring the aspect of consent, taking advantage, influencing. So they come and bring these factors to make that whole thing to be illegal. So at the end of the day, we as society, we tend to define what is legal, what is illegal. And as we evolve as societies, our laws change from time to time. There's a time homosexuality was illegal. Now it is legal. If you go to countries like Nigeria, it is very legal. For the age of consent is 9. If you come to Kenya, if a Nigerian man comes to Kenya, he has to contend with the fact that if he's caught with a 9-year-old, that man is going to, or that woman is going to land in jail for the rest of their lives. So as we evolve as societies, we tend to come up with what do we accept? So we as individuals, yes, we have freedoms, but our freedoms are limited with what society, and this society is the ruling class, our lawmakers. Whatever they say is right is what you're going to accept as right.
If I may add one thing, on the social contract theory that you mentioned, I think the idea of it it's not that there's a ruling class, it's that there's this some sort of a mindset, a collective mindset that society has, that every generation, certain values are priority. Like you mentioned, pedophilia, for example, something that I am completely disgusted by and I'm very much against. But as society, you mentioned that our values constantly evolve. This is not that there's a ruling class that defines, it's that we have a collective mindset that somehow emphasizes certain things. Eventually, the next generation eases up on some of those rules, creates new rules for themselves, and the cycle goes on like that. Those rules now that are thrown out of the window, for example, the homosexuality illegalization in the past, today has created a platform where those who are in some parts of the world who are homosexuals, they're not afraid of persecution. They're able to express themselves. These are rules that were created by the generation that came after the parents who grew up with this. So I think it is not that there's a ruling class, it's that the social mindset, or rather the consciousness of society, constantly is evolving, it's changing, sometimes for the better, and unfortunately also sometimes for the worse.
Yeah.
There's also another point I want to mention. This is unrelated, but I think it's very important to mention. I have been in a situation where I was told that I was born this way, or my preference is justified because it's natural. Correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps I'm ignorant on the subject, but I have always had this opinion, or rather this stance, that nothing in life is natural until it's some sort of preference. Just hear me out for a sec. You know how when you have never had ice cream in your life, you don't know what chocolate flavor tastes like, strawberry and vanilla. But by you experimenting, by you testing all of those flavors, you come to you develop a palate for a certain taste. So I think the same goes with life. It's not that we are born fixed with certain agendas or certain preferences as children. That would mean that we have a pre-programmed notion. Like, it will mean that somehow in the womb we picked up certain traits that are either inheritable, that are either that goes beyond nurturing. But if you look at it, I think, and this is one of the ways we can actually justify freedoms in sexuality, is that if we look at it from the point of view of nurture versus nature, if we think about it in terms of your experience in life determines what your preferences are. Sometimes, like a pedophile, those preferences are completely unacceptable. But there are those whose preferences are completely acceptable. If we look at it that way, we can not only logically fight for them, we can not only logically defend their opinions and their rights, but we can also normalize it. Rather than to say that you are born this way. To me, honestly, that is an absurd thing that I cannot comprehend, because it will mean that somehow your DNA has the code of a preference. DNAs don't have a preference. They have the blueprint of your build. Literally, it is your build. It is the house is, for example, when you're building a house, that blueprint doesn't have what color will go on the wall, but it has the design and the form and the function of the house. So I cannot comprehend that notion that certain behavioral traits are natural. Until I learn otherwise, I think that's where I'm stuck in right now. Okay. Sorry for deviating from the subject, but
that's fine. Okay, AKA. Then after that we can talk to V.
I think V came in before me, but sorry, V. I think it's something Moha said something, and it made me want to rebut. I think what came in when she said something is natural, it just means that it occurs, okay? Mm-hmm. And being natural or being born this way, I think those terms are used interchangeably when they are not necessarily the same. So yes, being a pedophile is natural. It does not mean that it's an excuse, or rather it's a reason for us to encourage it. It's just us saying that it happens. It does happen that some people are attracted to.
Mohammed, wait a bit, let him finish.
Yeah, actually, I was almost winding up. It just means that it does happen. And as Kay was saying, it doesn't mean that we encourage it. It's just that we realize it happens, and since we've seen its negative effects or impacts, then we have to control it.
So if I may say, respond to that. Number one, scientifically speaking, natural is something that occurs without prompt. Basically, it is something that can occur whether we have for example, a leaf. The design of a leaf is determined by the shape, by the type of tree it grows. Nothing of that sort can make it into, for example, a maple tree cannot have a certain eucalyptus leaf or something of that sort. That is natural. It is without prompt. On the idea of a pedophile, for example, let me just, this is how I understand it. It has something to do with power dynamic. It has nothing to do with an aspect of nature or natural. It is something, it's purely power. The reason why I believe it's purely power is because, one, most of the pedophiles that we know of, or most of the pedophiles that have expressed themselves on record, they have shared that they have always been sexually repressed, and they have had a form, one way or another, an experience that somehow halted their social progress, their ability to express themselves in a social setting, making them basically shadows in every group. And this basically alienated them further from the opposite sex, giving them the opportunity to connect with their peers. These are not opinions, mind you. These are documented works. The second thing I wanted to also express is that with pedophiles, it is a matter of control. As human beings, we have the idea, we have the preference, we like the idea of controlling our variables. We like to determine how something is set, and this creates in us the passion to always go for what we can control. No one ever goes for something that will challenge them, except that person who's realistic. Most of us always like to stick to what we are comfortable with, what we can control. And I truly believe the idea of pedophilia is not it is something to do with power dynamics. It is someone who was unable to connect with adults, but somehow realized that to an inexperienced child, to a child that is not experienced in matters of sex, in matters of the world, they have complete dominance over that person, over that child. And as a result, the concept of sex comes into play. That's why I don't believe it is natural.
Well, Mohammed, I would also point out that in most cases, regardless as to whether you're dealing with a child or a normal man to woman thing, a lot of the sex dynamics involve power dynamics. However, the brand has been up a while, so let's listen to you.
This might come as a shock to Mohammed, but from multiple lines of evidence, all human behaviors that have ever been examined have been found to have origins in genetics. So maybe just you can meditate upon that as I say the next thing that I'm going to talk about. My understanding of what is natural is simply what occurs in nature. That is, if you look outside and you see it, therefore it is natural. And I guess it's a very absurd, perhaps to most people, a very absurd definition of natural, because I also regard plastics as natural. But I want to make something clear. So if you look at just homosexual behavior, let's use that. Let's put pedophilia aside. That's quite too controversial for my taste. But when it comes to homosexual behavior, it has been observed in all animals and insects whose sexual behavior has ever been examined. That is, if you follow lions long enough, and there is this argument that it occurs more often in captivity, which is true, that animals in captivity tend to display this behaviors more often than those in the wild, but these behaviors do occur in the wild. So it is quite interesting that you find this overlap of human behaviors also in animals. That is, insects, mammals, birds, reptiles, they have all been observed to show homosexual behavior, which I think is essential when you're talking about your idea about matters of preference, that sometimes these behaviors could originate due to, someone's learned preference. They might not be innate, but actually the converse is true. And there was a very large genomic study which was published, must have been last year, and they were trying to find, are there genetic markers that are directly correlated with homosexual behavior. And what was actually found in this very large study was that there are multiple genomic markers that correlate with sexual behavior. And it is not just one, there's no gay gene. Yeah, there is a host of genes that influence sexuality. And because all these genes, also are affected by the environment, there is a huge complexity in this part. But so that aside, there are some points that I wanted to make earlier before we went into this. Let me just make them quickly and then I will summarize. So Mohammed, I agree with you that some liberties have to be curtailed so that you can have peace in the society. and so that people actually enjoy more liberties than they would enjoy if some of these liberties were not restricted. But it is not clear what we would rely on to limit these freedoms and liberties. So from the Declaration of Independence of the United States, there is something that they say that we hold these truths as self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So liberty is a big one. And then there is this famous quote by Ben Franklin who says that those who give up essential liberty to purchase a little safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. So I do agree with these points. At the same time, I do agree with you that people's liberties have to be limited. But I usually find that the reasons behind the reasons which are usually used by authoritative figures, and they are the ones who actually limit our liberty, the reasons they use are not particularly valid, especially when in Kenyan law they say nature. But if you look at nature, you find homosexuality is pervasive across animals, reptiles, and birds, which means they have misinterpreted what is actually natural. So I find that even though it is necessary for us to limit someone's right, for example, to pleasure, so it would be totally unwise to let people do whatever they want in public. How sure are we, or actually not how sure are we, but what can we rely upon to curtail these liberties better than we do? Because I don't, well, this might be an even more controversial position, but I don't think the standard methods we use are correct. For example, when you rely upon really old ancient traditions like religions, which were developed when people were less wiser than we are now. Yeah, I'm not sure whether those are the best ones we should use, but I'm open to be educated on this subject.
Well, okay. Okay, in Kenya, the standard for limitation of rights is that it should be, if I'm not wrong, it should be acceptable in an open and democratic society, and considering the rights of minorities. However, like when it comes to the born this way argument that is there to justify homosexuality, well, during my, it's called what, the coming of age years, I would not understand why anyone would be a homosexual. I would like, I thought it would be ridiculous because I had this friend of mine who was gay that I didn't even know was gay at the time, but was so upset that I couldn't understand how he would equate his homosexuality with albinism. Because like, you know, if you're an albino, like you're born an albino, right? But now, as an adult of sound mind, that I believe is that I understand that when it comes to attraction, you can't choose who you are, like, you can't help to decide who you're attracted to. Hence the born this way argument for homosexuality, which is the same thing, as much as V is not comfortable or finds it a bit controversial for pedophilia. That is the same argument they're coming up with, that they're born that way, like we can't help it, but we're attracted to children. Homosexuals use the same argument, same as heterosexuals. Like the same way that when you are coming of age, you realize that you find girls to be attractive if you're male, or you find men to be attractive if you're female. For the homosexual, instead of doing this, they found themselves to be like, oh my God, I'm attracted to my own gender. So should it be illegal for me, my standard has always been that if you're adults, you're consenting, it shouldn't be illegal. Whatever you guys are doing, as long as it's okay, unless it involves killing each other, I don't think anybody should consent to. It's called murder suicide. I think that is like a bit to the extreme level.
Why wouldn't
But
I allow myself to be killed or allow somebody to kill me?
Thank you. I'm also pro-suicide, by the way.
I know, like I think it's something that is subject to abuse, because I would happily kill my spouse and have my spouse choose that my wife is gonna kill me, then after she kills me, she's gonna kill herself. So what happens if I don't kill myself? Am I a murderer? I fulfill this guy's wish, man, and he's dead.
You
So
broke a contract, so
what?
you should suffer with that. You broke a contract. If you had agreed you're going to commit suicide after you kill him, and you
But
don't, then
but I, like, I think committing suicide is one of those things that is so serious that I don't judge people who commit suicide, by the way. I think it's a very difficult
I
situation.
don't think it really matters whether you judge them or not. And I think we are straying. Can we finish with the natural thing, then we can come to suicide?
Yeah. So when it comes to born this way, for the homosexuals, I get, like, I've seen them. I read the decision on that repeal, that act for that section in the penal code that says against the order of nature. There was the born this way part. However, my understanding was, I had a friend who was doing the matter. I understand that the church had a very big influence on it. And like Kenya, they were like, Kenya is not ready to legalize homosexuality. And that's when you know that if you see, like, as per the social contract theory, my understanding of the social contract theory is that you surrender these things, instead of regulating them as your individuals, you leave it to this, you create something that you surrender these rights for this, or maybe ruling classes, it's the wrong word to use it. I don't remember. I studied this like such a long time ago. But these are the people who come up with the rules of operation. So you find that, like, in a country like Kenya, you find that the people who are, when it comes to morality, the church in Kenya has a lot of influence. And that's why you see that this repeal 162 was not just in Kenya in terms of homosexuality. It happened, I think, in Kenya, I think, was it Botswana or Zimbabwe at the same time? And Zimbabwe said that, given that we are former British colonies, our laws are a bit similar. I think it was Botswana. Botswana was like, no, this is crap. So right now in Botswana, you can enter, like, it's called criminalizing homosexuality is no longer a crime there. But in Kenya, it still is, because I understand that the church went and spoke to the president, and the president spoke to the CJ, who spoke to the judge, who still like, no, we are not ready for this. Because when you read that decision, it's just bullshit. Because I don't understand how, if I'm an adult and I like being drilled in the ass, what is your problem? I don't understand.
Okay, I think I'll just jump right in.
Yep.
Actually, to correct one thing, homosexuality is not illegal. What is illegal are homosexual acts. So I don't know how the government can judge
okay, let me ask you.
the acts themselves.
No, AKA, let me ask you, before you continue, what is the point of me being a gay person if I cannot enter into a romantic relationship with a person who shares my views?
Oh, you can enter a romantic relationship, just don't do certain acts. That's according to the government. That's not according to me.
What is romantic relationship according to you?
That is actually making it illegal, but in a funny way. you know.
Exactly, but I was just correcting that there's actually a subtle difference.
What is
Like
it? I'm asking because
let me pause you guys here. Do understand one small thing about the law. It tends to give itself what is called wiggle room, in the sense that you cannot accuse the Kenyan government of discriminating against homosexuals because it doesn't legally.
Yes.
However, the law does not actually, the current law was modified a bit, does not actually legalize, make homosexual acts illegal. It makes acts against the order of nature.
Order of nature.
However, it doesn't define what the order of nature is. So it leaves it up to the judge and
the church, judge and church,
maybe church, wherever, to define what is against the order of nature.
Order of nature.
A homosexual, and you can, as you put it rather colorfully, drill yourself in the ass or be drilled in the ass. As long as the judge doesn't define that against the law of nature, it is good. But if the judge does define it as against the law of nature, it's a bit of a problem. The only problem with that is that it's also going to apply to, what about heterosexuals
who love toys,
who love anal sex?
Not just anal, but if you love toys in your relationship, yes. My friend, if your boyfriend or girlfriend tells you you need to use that, what is it called?
Something.
I forget.
Yes. The wrong things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Beads.
I mean, like, you can go to the police station and just like, hey, Mr. OCS, this guy is asking me to act against the order of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
V, you look like you have something to put in before we interrupt. Let's listen to V.
Yeah, so I skirted around pedophilia because I had not read about it. I've just checked what does the latest research say about this, whether do we see some inherent biological differences between men who are child sex offending and those who are not. And there is an article that was actually published early last year, a big article, multiple researchers. They looked at over 190 people. And though none of the major findings was specific to pedophilia, but they were for child sex offending. And what they found was there are specific abnormalities in early brain development in these people that could be correlated with their child sex offending. And well, they talk about testosterone-linked abnormalities in early brain development. And this is about genetic interactions. So it just goes on to show that, so there is this big argument in genetics. So my bias is that I study genetics. There is this big argument whether all human behaviors or all behaviors across the natural world of all animals can be ascribed to a genetic basis. And it just happens that so far, there is no behavior that we have come across that does not have a genetic basis. So I think we should move away from the idea that behaviors are unnatural. And we should now focus on whether these behaviors are good or not good. Because so far, beyond reasonable doubt, all these behaviors, no matter how delinquent they are, appear to be natural, have natural consequences. They have natural causes. For example, in the instance of child sex offending here, there is a correlation with some methylation, which is just a small chemical change in the DNA of these people in a certain region. So maybe just trying to...
Like a region geographically or a region like biologically?
Biologically, not geographically, because we do have child sex offending all across the world. It's not limited to any particular geographical region. Yes, so what I just wanted to say is that maybe this might be the time for some of us to discard that idea that these are learned behaviors. They could be very much natural. People could be born this way. It's just now that the society has to navigate around this issue, because people are born with disabilities. It's not unusual, and disabilities don't have to be physical. They can actually be psychological and behavioral. That does not mean that we should not legislate against them. We definitely should. Yeah, we should lock these people up. But while locking them up, we should also have appreciation for the fact that these are not problems of their own fault. And of course, there are some people who do this willingly. So the people who actually just go out of their way and perform these power play things that Mohammed so eloquently talked about. But there are instances where we find these impulses are, things that these people cannot help. So we have to recognize that there are some inherent psychological problems here that even as we legislate against them and institute punitive action, we need to have a more scientific conversation around this. Do we also offer these people therapy to try and remedy this problem? Or is it just enough to treat them as criminals who deserve to be put behind bars?
I think I need to go into this. There's two things here looking at. If it is genetic and considered undesirable, then it probably would be similar to a situation where we find somebody who was born without hands or legs. We don't imprison them because they don't have hands or legs. What we do, we try to correct their lack of hands or legs so that they have something similar that they can use to get around this. However, the whole thing has brought up the thing is, you still come back the same thing. What do we decide? Where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line on the freedom? Because what you're mentioning is that we can't use the excuse, this is natural, this is unnatural, or whatever. But on the other hand, we, as Kay said earlier on, the fact that something is natural doesn't mean it is necessarily good. I mean, snake venom is natural, but I don't think we're going to be speaking about people being bitten by a snake and say, let's just ignore that because, well, it is natural. So the question still comes up to, where do we draw the line? How do we decide that this level of freedom, this level of somebody wanting to do whatever it is, should be prescribed, and yet somebody else wanted to do something else? Let's take a less controversial topic. Okay, maybe not quite less controversial. Let's take blasphemy, for example. At what level do we say that blasphemy should be refused? I mean, should be proscribed in society, or blasphemy should be allowed in society? If I say atheists are fools because they don't love God, should we agree to that? On the other hand, if somebody says Jesus was a bastard, should we jail them? Where do we draw the line?
For me, what I think, from what I've seen, is that, like, when it comes to expression, for me, saying that Jesus was a bastard, it's not, for me, it's not big. I don't give a shit about Jesus. I don't like.
It is technically correct.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes, instead of whether it's blasphemy, but anyway, go ahead.
But it depends where you come from, yeah. Like my experience with my parents, like my mom is particularly very religious. So over the weekend, I went to visit them. So like I have younger siblings who've just completed like the current degree, not degree, it's called what? High school program. So we were just having a discussion about it, like, oh yeah, what are you taught in school? Number one, blood transfusion is bad. That is what they're taught in school under the current CRE program. Program. Yes, that if you're going, it's called, it is what it is. Like, if God say you're gonna die, you're gonna die. You're not supposed to accept.
Isn't that
a Jehovah's Witness thing?
No, it's in the current CRE program curriculum.
Wow. Okay. Changing times.
Like, yes, my sister takes CRE and she's supposed to be a candidate thanks to Rona. She's not a candidate anymore until Margot decides otherwise. Like, so we were telling this to my parents, and my parents like, no way you're being taught that in school. I'm like, but yeah, that is what the curriculum teaches. That number one, according to the yes. By the way, SS, I think like the next time I go visit them, actually, like I think if people decided to challenge CRE, like Christian religious education as it is taught right now, it's full of BS. Like that is the correct answer to our question is that if you're to die or get a blood transfusion, the correct answer is that you should refuse the blood transfusion. It's not a Jehovah's Witness thing.
I honestly thought it was only Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yes, so did I.
I actually thought it was the same until I had my conversation with my brother and sister. Like, I have such a huge age difference with my younger siblings that, like, they're that young. They're like, oh yeah, that is what CRE teaches, that if you are sick and you require a blood transfusion, the answer is, or like a kidney transplant, you need like, all this thing, because they're told that blood transfusion is man-made. Kidney transplants are also man-made. So for those reasons is that they're not made by God. So you should not accept them.
I think I wouldn't put it past them because of those technicalities they bring around that, oh, this is not God's doing or creation.
Yeah. How do you enter the syllabus?
But you do understand that, like, for Christian religious education, that's how they're supposed to be taught. Like, God is the supreme person. This is what is, what is acceptable. I don't know about Islamic religious education. Maybe under Islam you're allowed. I don't know. But under CRE, no, you're not allowed to do blood transfusion. You're not allowed to do transplants. Like, if your leg is bad, like you get into an accident, you're not supposed to do, like those amputation and all that shit. You're not supposed to do. Yes, you're supposed to accept yourself. This is maneno ya Mungu. This is how God has, that is how you're supposed to handle this shit.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I see the rationale behind that because, like on many matters, you'd find that that's why we have, I don't know, should I call them modern age of modern day Christians who do certain things differently because they found that it's hard to stick to the traditional way that maybe the Bible intended things to be done. So they have to make adjustments.
My mother, who is also very religious, at the same time was like, if I was a doctor, I don't give a shit if somebody wants it's called a blood transfusion, a transplant or not. If that's what medicine says works, that is what. She doesn't believe that you should be given the option to choose whether you want a blood transfusion, a transplant, or what. As long as this is the best option for the patient, she believes that the doctor should be given that liberty. But I told her, no. In reality, that is not how it works. If I'm a patient, my freedom of choice dictates that if I don't want a blood transfusion, I do not want, and you as a doctor, as much as you know, it's the best option for me, there's nothing you can do about it. For her, she found that to be like, what? Ridiculous. No. But you see, we have freedoms. She's like, for her, she thought as a doctor, you go to school and study how to best preserve human life. Then you.
Okay. You just mentioned preserving human life, and then my mind went back to suicide and murder. I don't know. I'm excited about it.
But you can imagine that you, as a doctor, you're a doctor, you go to school, you take that, it's called whatever oath, then that you preserve human life. Then you meet this patient who comes and tells you, like, the best treatment option for this student, this patient is that number one, they need a transplant or they need a transfusion in order to survive. Then this patient is like, ha 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 ha, no. If God wants me to die, this is the order of nature, man. If I don't have this shit, it's okay, it's fine,
And that's where you find your job description is getting quite complicated.
Yes.
If I may hold you two guys, Muhammad seems to want to say something, at least based upon
Okay.
handout.
Is
Muhammad?
it Ngao or Mohammed?
Well, on the chat, Muhammad has put up his hand. Muhammad? Okay, he doesn't seem to be around. So I'll put a twist in this thing.
Where's Ngao?
Can you hear me?
Ngao is there.
Mohammed. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yes, sorry. I have to conclude quickly, but I wanted to say 2 points. The number one thing is that tonight I was made aware that I have to look into certain things that I'm quite uncomfortable with. That is the nature of learning, I suppose. But the second thing that I'm also very, I would like to conclude with is that for me, this is just on the subject of freedom. Anything, this is something that I have been trying to at least tell myself. Anything that I do that doesn't negatively affect others or society, in my opinion, should be deemed worthy of to be legal. At the end of the day, we can talk about freedoms, rights, and so on, but if we do not acknowledge the law of society, the law of the land, we are shooting ourselves in the leg. So if we really want to look at freedom for what it is, I think it starts with harm. Anything that doesn't contribute negatively to society, to the individual himself or herself, or to another person, by you doing, say, the act of love, for example, it doesn't matter who you love. Obviously, we all differ on based on our moral values and our religious values. But at the end of the day,
Mohammed, when you say act of love, what do you mean?
All acts of love. All. There is no... Okay, this is my opinion on love. In this world, it is very difficult to... I've expressed this before, but in this world, it is very difficult to find someone that can tolerate you or like you long enough to say that I want to be with you for a while. But it is harder for that person that you for them to love you back. So if you are in a situation where you like a person and they like you back, screw everything else, go for it. What do you have to lose anyway? I think that is my approach to love. But generally, in terms
of liking you, you just kill them, yeah?
No, but it's just I don't know what I will do, but all I know is that I've had a good time for that period. But generally, on the aspect of freedom, I think it applies to the same in love, because anything that you do that does not affect negatively to the stakeholders of your society, the individuals, the environment, that should be legal. And when we talk about legal, we identify what can be done without consequences. So for me, that is my belief in belief in what is it? That is how I believe freedom should be.
Mohammed, we'll get back to that because the very idea of freedom, affect negatively to the society in itself is also a rather shaky idea. However,
can I explain a little bit? What I meant by that is, for example, we have people who want to do certain things. Certain things, for example, we have sociopaths in this world. Dangerous human beings who do not view other human beings as people. They view them as something akin to a hunt. That is, to them, they want the freedom to be able to do that. But you see, what they will be doing is harming. Yeah, of course, it's an extreme example. We also have the example of theft of property. We have the example of murder. We have the example of swindling, laundering money, and so on. As long as your act of freedom at the end of the day comes down to your ability to express yourself, either in action, either in your ideas, in terms of belief, or whatever it may be. Those should not be against everyone else's, anything that conflicts with everyone else. They exist, of course. Our value, we are not all homogeneous. We are not all the same. We all have different values and different agendas of life. But what I meant by negative freedoms is anything that you do that will affect negatively to someone else. Either you harm them physically by either killing them or you steal from them in terms of property or something else. That to me is negative freedom.
So Mohammed, for example,
okay, before you go there, Ngao has had his hand up right for long. We've hogged all the thing. So Ngao, can we hear what you say?
You will have to excuse me tonight. I have to attend to something else.
Ramadan is over, eh?
Don't worry, Kay.
It has been a formality for me.
No, I'm just messing with you. Don't worry. Don't mind me.
But sincerely speaking, I have enjoyed this. Thank you so much for allowing me to contribute.
Well,
good night.
Please join us again.
I will, definitely. Good night, everyone.
So now we are waiting for you to give us your insights. You need to unmute your mic. You need to unmute your mic.
I totally saw a YouTube video about this one.
No, we cannot hear you.
No, we cannot hear you.
Okay. Let me say, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. My thing is, I'm first sorry because of being late. You see, I had this bad. Okay. I had some misfortune, and I was already online, but then I had to deal with it. My car had mechanical problems. I couldn't deal with it. I had to leave it away, then come back home with a cab. Okay, but then when it comes to freedom, I must agree with Abda. Okay, what's the name? Mohammed. Yeah, that freedom must not infringe on any other's freedom. So on matters abortion, I must say that, okay, so long as, the kid, whatever progeny is there is not really a live human being and they don't have any right. So if it matters to the mother, then I'm okay with it.
Pregnant woman, not mother.
Yeah, the private woman, think pregnant woman.
So you're saying that it doesn't matter what the kid may think, the fetus may think,
the fetus may think it doesn't matter. So long as it affects the life of the living being, then it doesn't matter at all.
So the fetus is not a living being.
If it is maybe a Muslim kid or a Christian kid having the baby, and they don't have the qualities, they don't wish to have the baby, then it should be eliminated.
A lot of people idolize these guys, whether it's a rock star.
So are you looking at it that a fetus is not a living being?
Yeah, the fetus is never a living being. The fetus is like whatever you maybe ejaculated outside the body.
Well, allow me to bring my biases into play. I do agree with Ngao's position, but I don't agree with his reasons. I don't.
I think that's what we all feel, especially when you say a fetus is not a living thing. Yeah,
definitely, a fetus is definitely a living thing. Sperms and ova are living things. Life don't begin at conception. Life began billions of years ago, and it has been in constant continuity ever since. And if life was beginning at conception, it would mean that a sperm and an ovum are dead. And then somewhere, you know. So anyway, I agree with Ngao's position. But I think women usually look at it, well, I'm not a woman, but I think, okay, I would look at it in the sense that who has the authority to make this decision? So the relationship between a child, not a child, but a fetus and a mother is actually a dependency relationship where the mother does not depend on the fetus. The pregnant mother, the woman, does not depend on the fetus. But the fetus depends on the pregnant
mother.
Yes, so it is therefore the decision of the pregnant woman to allow this fetus to depend on her. And if the woman feels as if this fetus is going to limit, her life in any way, and she thinks that that reason is sufficient, then by all means, she has the right to make the decision, because she is the one who created that fetus, and she can create many more anyway. Yeah, but when you say it's not a living thing, I think you...
I didn't say it's not a living thing. What I said is very simple, that the mother who gave to the offspring, who gave back the egg, which was fertilized and it brought up the progeny, is responsible for the upkeep of the baby. If they can't sustain the progeny, then they have the right to dismiss it or to accept it. That's what I said.
Okay. Now, I'll also take you into the other less controversial areas. What about things like blasphemy, free speech, imagining the death of the president, or the death of God, for that matter? What about things like that? Should we restrict them?
No, you should not restrict these things, because...
Let me take it further. What about talking about violence? What is now called incitement to violence?
Yeah.
What about those? Should we restrict them?
Yeah, incitement to violence and destruction to property should be condemned, because it's like condemning something which is like living, which is existing, and destroying it because of an imaginary being. But in a case where like an atheist maybe forms a church, or somebody who is a free thinker starts a movement, it becomes a bit hard for me to accept the ideology of them trying to deny others' right because of imaginary beliefs. We all know gods are imaginary.
No, but let me ask, regardless as to whether they're imaginary or not, because at the moment that's not the issue here. Would it be justifiable for, say, a Christian church to destroy a devil worshipping church or to stop the registration of an atheist church?
No, it doesn't make any sense.
Okay, on the other hand, would it be justifiable for, say, a group of atheists to protest about the establishment of a Christian church?
I don't buy that also.
Okay.
If you have beings, if you support something which you can logically, evidentially, or logically confirm, then you should not be having a problem with any other person forming a similar thing. We have Scientology, we have like so many other things. Atheists, we have atheists like USS, we have so many other things. Like you can't defend, you can't protect yourself from other criticism. You must accept that like we are in a logical world where we must accept criticism of any other kind.
What if it hurts you?
It does. Okay, if it hurts me, I love to let it go.
Okay. Admin, you've been sitting down and you've not said anything. Yet you look very
admin.
Yeah,
the looks admin, very administrative.
It looks very administrative, but it's kept quiet.
Who's the name of that?
Is it me?
Yeah.
That would
Can
be.
You hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Actually, this is my first time using this Zoom.
Oh.
Actually, I'm trying to figure out anyway.
What is your name, admin?
This is actually my name, eh?
Yeah, your name is currently admin.
Oh, I was wondering how you made me admin. I'll have to change it to Martin.
Yes, you'd have to change it. Meanwhile, can we hear you?
Yes, but the SS to make catch the rest of us who have been attending loyally to these meetings. Title your admin, but it's you.
I think admin is the username on his computer, probably.
Any Zoom to that, and you given that option of typing.
Wait, you are.
SS, you're giving you.
To learn the features. And how to put this background. There is this background thing.
Let's first get your opinion on this before we go down to our backgrounds.
Listen a bit. I think I saw you. Another thing in another forum is KY the chef.
Sorry?
Is KY the chef?
Oh, KY the chef? No, that doesn't sound familiar.
What do you mean the chef?
Okay, so I think I'm mistaking you with somebody else.
No. You never know by the
we need to hear that.
Please, go.
We need to hear
you never know. Maybe there's something about me I don't know that is out there. So please.
Okay. I've been in in FIKA for so long. Yeah, we had such a lady who was, I know it was chef something, I can't remember the name, but I don't think it's you.
Chef Cookie.
I remember that name. She was chef something. I can't remember her name, but yes, I do remember chef something.
Okay. SS and I. tunajuana vizuri, so
I've never been a chef.
I know.
Okay, I'm a chef to my son, but the rest of the world now.
Me, I cook. Okay, granted, I have survived this long, but I will not cook for people to survive.
No way. There's a lady who loves octopuses.
Unless chef.
Okay, Martin, can we get?
Let's carry on.
We've distracted you. Can we get your opinion?
Yeah. There are a lot of things that you have discussed, so I don't know which one exactly, which topic exactly. I'm still trying to catch up. Which issue
about
exactly?
Freedom generally. Everything else has revolved. Everything else has revolved around the freedom thing. Freedom in various forms.
Oh, the topic is freedom in various forms.
Yes. So we've talked about abortion, blasphemy, women's rights, nature and nurture.
Oh yeah.
We've mixed up everything, but
yeah, I think we have discussed this before in our meeting where we agreed that as long as your actions do not interfere in any way with others people lives, you can do whatever you want, and that's actually should be the rule to determine what we should allow and shouldn't allow. For example, you have talked about homosexuality, whereby the difference between pedophilia and homosexuality. Why should we allow homosexuality and not pedophilia? Yeah. In pedophilia, there is no consent. There is a minor involved. So I think that's the general rule. If your actions do not affect other people, then you should do whatever you want. And I think that should be the general rule of how to determine actually what should be allowed in the society and what we shouldn't allow in the society.
But what if your actions annoy me? That affects me, right?
Yeah.
What if your actions annoy me?
Sorry?
What if your actions annoy me? So that affects me.
They annoy you. Mm-hmm. Oh, then we are raising the bar too high. Annoying, just annoying. Yeah. I think we're now raising the bar too high.
Isn't that the whole basis behind the blasphemy laws?
Exactly. That's actually where the bar is.
No, I think setting at annoying is it's high. Think about what if you show up to work or you come close to me and you're smelling. That I think also is it's actually quite complicated in where we should set the bar. Is it physically harming somebody from simple things like annoying? Where should we? But
what if I don't like that smell?
Yeah.
What if I don't like that smell? You may think it's a nice smell, but I don't like it.
Leave alone even smelling. What if I don't like how your hair is?
Oh yeah.
Wait.
So we have to determine where to set that.
I don't think the hair thing is a joke. We have had girls being expelled from schools because of their hairstyle, especially in the United States. We have seen very funny instances where because girls have braided their hair.
But that is not actually annoying. That's actually a code of dressing.
No. The instance
it's not because
they
don't do it because it's annoying. It's just to have that uniformity and sort of a code.
But people are not uniform.
So why do you insist on a
uniform? Not that guy who,
or eyes uniform.
Yeah.
Why don't you insist on eyes uniform or noses uniform or hands uniform? Why hair uniform?
Yeah, why hair? Yeah, I think now that determines where we should set the bar. Is it annoying? Is it physically harming? But I think I'll go personally with physically harming. If my action do not in any way in a physical manner they do not affect anybody physically, I think they should be allowed to do it.
But think about it. A huge number of countries, some have removed them, some have not removed them, but a huge number of countries have blasphemy laws. And the only thing you can talk about blasphemy is annoying.
And
it's annoying.
That is literally the only thing.
You have hurting somebody's feelings.
Yes.
It says even nudity, and I think
even nudity, yes. You're hurting somebody's feeling, because I mean, if a naked woman walks in front of me here, some of us will smile, some of us will frown, but technically, who is hurt? And why?
Actually, in fact,
does it reach this threshold where I must protect that person against that hurt?
Actually, that issue of women dressing, I'm struggling to fight I'm struggling to determine whether it should be allowed. Would I feel okay if people start taking action against women dressing decently? Because actually, I do feel affected if I see a woman maybe dressing in a certain way, she has affected me. And
What is indecent?
Indecent.
I totally saw that coming.
Am I indecent right now? Like if you stood up,
the minute I saw you wake up, I knew it was coming.
You walked right into that one.
Right now, you're affecting my feelings, Kay. So.
Am I indecent?
Yes. I can see your hair. You're supposed to cover your hair.
If I decide to what I am drinking, am I indecent?
If you walk naked, I think I have a right to tell you.
Why?
Because I'm unable to concentrate on whatever it is that I'm doing. Yeah?
It's not your clothes, it's not your body. What is it of yours? Why do you have to worry about how it is?
I mean, for example, admin, if I look at you and say like, oh my God, this guy, he doesn't have hair, he's wearing specs. Oh my God, I'm so turned on right now. Is he indecent?
No, that doesn't actually happen. It doesn't happen.
Are you sure?
Oh, you don't know me. You don't know me, but SS, if I told SS and SS knows me and he agrees with, you're like, oh my God, that guy.
Slim Square, your hand is up. Perhaps we could hear from you. You need to unmute.
Yep, guys, are you getting me?
Yeah.
Yes, we're hearing you.
Oh, good evening.
Good evening.
It's for the first time here, but then I really don't feel whether we will be able to set a bar, because you see, people are only affected by their views, not really what they see, but their views. And views are more of mental, and you can't control a mind, and they keep changing from one person to another every minute, every now and then. So setting a bar would be so difficult here, and that would mean really concluding on the baseline of freedom. Not easy.
So you're advocating for let them all be free?
We should let people live. We should just live like we just live. Because you see, however much I would say that I don't hurt you physically, but I steal your money, mentally you're hurt. And that would be something. So your view onto this issue that I've stolen your money would really interfere with you. But not the fact that I've stolen your money, but the view that I have stolen your money.
So here I've stolen your money, you're hurt. Should I prescribe that behavior or should we let it go?
But you see, one thing, however much you try to find out why, it's the view. So people are not affected by things. People are not affected by things, but their view of the thing make that thing bring in some effects. You see?
Yeah, that's why I gave you a specific example. You've stolen my money, so I'm hurt.
Yes.
Is that behavior we should prescribe? Or we should just say, that's all right, let it continue?
I really don't know because you see, if I stole your money, it was because I have some view. Maybe you have excess from me. So my view would push me into stealing your money.
Let me even take it further. Let me look at it on the other hand. I've stolen your wife. As I hear wives can be stolen. I never used to know until recently. But anyway, I've stolen your wife.
No, SS. Let's look at it at a different angle.
They can be stolen. I didn't know how, but yeah.
Okay, SS.
No.
Let Slim talk.
Let me ask this.
Let's hear Slim.
No, SS.
I got mugged. Listen, I got mugged 2 days ago. Yeah, I found some few thugs. I was getting from work at 9. They stole my phone, my key, my everything. Are those guys really, because they didn't steal any of my innocence or my nudity, are those guys really acceptable to do that?
Slim, there is an example.
No, you see, these guys have stolen all your personal effects like money, phone, and all that.
Yeah.
You see, you'll much be
you
hurt.
said stealing money was.
Yeah, it's the worst thing that can happen to you, my friend. Somebody can to do some things to you that you can never take back, but money you can make.
Money, sure. You see,
I did.
We should just let it slide. Like it has happened. It has happened.
Hey, it's
No.
the one.
Answer my question. They've stolen your wife.
But it says I don't really think whether stealing a wife is something because you own no adult.
I didn't know it's possible until recently. I heard apparently people steal wives. I don't know how.
But do you own an adult? Can you own one?
Own one.
Mr. Slim, are you married? If you're not married, you do not know what it feels like to be for your spouse to be stolen.
Even if I'm married, I don't think whether I'll own that wife. We are just coexisting. Like I coexist.
They'll be stolen.
They'll be stolen.
Yeah.
You're coexisting until that time you find that you're like, oh my God, you left me for SS. And then you even blame her. You're like, SS, what the fuck? You thief. Thief of spouses. Mwizi wa mabibi. No. I know you.
Do you see where our problem will come in? Our problem will be much on.
Hey.
We've lost you.
Okay, I don't know. He's still on.
Now he's hard this lady.
I will take this opportunity to interrupt and give us a reality check concerning ownership. The whole transaction of marriage, where a father walks the daughter down the aisle and hands over the daughter to the man, was a transfer of ownership. And this is the implicit idea behind the entire ceremony. And this has been how it has been before some, people decided that they are finally woke and now they want to do away with this idea. But when the concept of marriage arose, regardless of whatever community you came from, as long as there was an idea of bride price, there was an idea of transferring ownership. And well, I can't speak for communities where, like for example, the Hindu communities where it's the woman who pays the bride price. I still don't understand the dynamics. They could be similar.
Let me correct you there. It's not the woman who pays the bride price. It's the woman's family who pays the bride price.
Yes.
So the woman's family gives this guy for removing this burden from them. They give him
interesting.
In the same way, it is still an ownership transfer.
Just
What about
parameters?
So although we are so averse to this idea of slavery and we associate owning human beings with slavery, slavery is not the only institution in which people own each other. Marriages implicitly imply an ownership engagement, and that is why, especially when you follow all this, what are they called, traditions that have been put in place to go along with marriage. When you say, I am taking these cows to your parents' home so that I can take you away from them,
I think
basically buying.
I think when it comes to taking cows to my parents' house or to your parents' house, I don't think it's any different than that ceremony where you're exchanging vows. Like, I do accept to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold and all that crap. As in, like, what's the difference?
Well, you see, there is a mix of traditions here. There is the Christian traditions, and there are the,
traditional
African traditions that we have had. So, and to make matters worse, we also have modern traditions. So there's a sort of blend that exists between all those, different sources of ideas. The modern conception is
where iko mtu hapo hivyo ako na shida ya
yeah. So according to modern ideas, especially after we have gone through all these feminist movements and the emancipation of women, we regard marriage as a participation of equals. But that was not always the case. Yeah. In fact, the sacrosanct of marriage was hell-bent on the idea that you have been given to someone who now legally has domain over you. Yeah. There is a real ownership history here. I'm pretty sure if I go back 400 years, there is no marriage that was taking part where they would say, okay, now the man and the woman are equal partners in this marriage. No, it didn't exist. Yes, so I think we should be aware of how these ideas have been changed. And we also have to recognize that the idea of ownership of people does not have to come in one single flavor, where now that you're being owned by your husband, you're your husband's slave. Even in instances where marriage was purely a matter of ownership, the woman still had her own rights and she could abandon the marriage, although at great cost, but it was still possible.
Even slaves had rights.
Even slaves had rights, yes.
That way.
Yeah, but I'm quite sure wives had more rights than slaves.
In some societies.
Granted, SS, for today's topic, I was wondering, given Donald Trump's statements and given my experience with Kenya, people like Kabogo, they were ousted out of, like, people voted against him because of misinformation. So do you have freedom to spread propaganda? Is it right?
I think your point comes in with another topic we had was it last week? No, about some two weeks or so ago. The issue of privacy versus...
This is not privacy, this is propaganda in terms of political purposes.
Yes, but if you think about it, that is still an issue of privacy. How do you manage to tell about lies to somebody unless there is something that is not known about him?
He was a normal guy, but for propaganda to work, number one, you need to have numbers.
And you had to have secrets.
No.
The possibility.
Let me tell you, this week I tried to ask my mother to buy milk. My friend was selling milk. She's like, hiyo ni maziwa ya Ruto? Hapana. Hiyo maziwa sijui naacha ulimi yako kama imechomeka sijui for how long nini. I'm like, what the fire? What the
because everybody believes that the information you have in front of you is not necessarily all the information you have. And yet,
but actually the problem is
from giving out information.
But like for us as FIKA, yeah, I have noticed like there's this guy who came with his conspiracy theories to our group and met FIKAists. You know.
Skeptics, yes.
Yes. I think that guy with time ataquit your group, But so as a FIKA free thought goodies, do you think you as the admin you have an obligation to weed out fake news?
No.
Bullshit. Or should you let people like me who have no idea of what 5G is absorb whatever people are selling there that 5G causes cancer, 5G is bad, 5G is all this shit?
No, as FIKA, there is a different kind of obligation. In FIKA, the obligation is to enable you to look through the information you have and make reasoned judgments from it. So what would happen with FIKA if you had the 5G fellas coming into we would give you the various different facts about the situation and allow you to make an informed judgment. So if somebody says something like 5G marks cause coronavirus, we would also show you where we know coronavirus comes from, or we would show you the net effect between wavelengths and viruses, if there is any.
And where does it stop? Where does it stop? At what point do you say it's enough? Because you can't keep, there are some people who won't accept facts.
No, the fact is...
Some people we have been talking to for the last, many years. You know, the people, okay, this is my opinion about this issue of conspiracy theories and all that. The people who are most vulnerable conspiracy theories, from very radical ones to even like even the simple one, like you're saying of milk. These are people who are loyal to ideas and people. Okay? For example, if I don't like Ruto, I will tend to believe anything negative about Ruto, whether it's true or not. Okay? If I hate scientists and I feel scientists make me feel small, I'll want to believe anything that talks negative or shit about science or facts. Okay? So before, I think the people who are, like I said, people who are most vulnerable to conspiracy theory are people who are loyal to it. They are loyal to politicians.
Ideology.
They are loyal to religion. They are loyal to it. They have already made up their mind. This is what I'm supporting. Okay? I don't care about facts. I don't care about truth. I don't care about lies. This is what I'm going to support. And that's the difference between free thinkers and this kind of characters. You can tell them, you can give them all the facts. They won't listen. Yeah, they're going to listen, but they're not going to process what you're going to say. And if they process at the back of their mind, they won't tell you, okay, you're right. They continue pushing for the same nonsense they've been pushing for the last 7 years. So I'm asking us, where do you stop?
Actually, honestly, I wouldn't say we stop. Because we will constantly try to engage, we will constantly try to bring it, because I'll be honest, one thing history has taught us is that sometimes it is that one mad man in the bush who may actually have the correct idea. It is a very rare situation, but it's not an unknown situation.
Yeah, but there's a
shut down all the madmen in the bush. You'll never listen to the one man who may actually be speaking sense. However, the cacophony of the multiple madmen can sometimes cover the sense.
But you see, it is how their ideas, what really matters. Yeah, they could be right. Like, for example, I was thinking about, like example, this issue of what was this Madagascar herbal thing? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now I didn't have a problem. I didn't have a problem with the
COVID
traditional medicine. Yeah.
COVID organics. That's what it was called.
Oh yeah, COVID organics. I don't have a problem with herbal medicine, but it should be subjected to the same standard like any other medicine in the big pharmaceutical companies. And that's the same thing with conspiracy theory. I don't care what kind of idea you come up with, but you should subject it to the same scrutiny like any other idea. It can't be too easy for some ideas, and some ideas are subjected to these standards, and they are very careful in how they put their ideas, and they are very careful to say, okay, we are not very sure about this. And some other guys just get to just, sharp shit in the social media.
That's the thing you're looking at. What we do in FIKA, we will let them talk, right? Mm-hmm. And we will let the detractors talk. We'll let the people who coming, but then we'll try. We don't really succeed because right now I think most of the moderators and the things are busy on so many things. But we'll try and get people to think about the ideas they are bringing about, and also get other people who are listening to these ideas to think about it. Because once in a while, you do need that madman in the market so that you can tell others, this is how a madman looks like.
But you haven't, you see, you haven't, as an admin, described him as a madman.
No. Because that is not my job.
In fact, can you do what Jack Dorsey did with Trump? This guy, you fact check every post this guy is posting.
But actually, that is not my job.
But label him a special case.
But
hold on a second. Yeah. Okay. My job in FIKA is to enable you to do the fact checking, not me to do it for you. The idea is that when you look at these posts, you should start learning how to develop and see, do I listen to this? Is there any plausibility in this? Is there any plausibility in the others? It should come from you, because you should have learned that when I hear this, these are the kind of things that tell me this is a fake post, this is conspiracy theory, this is something that might have merit to listen to. But if I fact check for you, what I'm doing is removing the whole burden of checking from somebody else and putting it on myself. So what I'm telling you, it's going to be a question of believe those conspiracy theories or believe me. I'm putting another authority. They are claiming authority, but I'm putting
But some people are, if you look at some of these characters, like they are attracted to trash. I remember calling one trashy from that cartoon character.
It is
in Toy Story. They just like, it's like they are allergic to truth. In fact, when I see a post from some people, I know it's a conspiracy theory. I don't even need to know the content of it. Or the fact, I know, if he is endorsing this idea, it's a conspiracy theory. I don't even need to research on it.
You remember this, that if you are equipped with the methods of knowing how to identify a conspiracy theory that is valid, because let's be realistic, there are conspiracies in the world.
Yes.
Conspiracy theories are valid.
Yes, they are valid.
But however, there are also a lot of people who see conspiracy where there's not even conspiracy.
Yes, exactly.
The problem with most of us is that we don't have the tools to tell the difference.
Exactly.
So we tend to fall in one of two things. We fall in one of two things. Either we completely dismiss everything, or we completely accept everything, both of which are wrong. We should have the tools instead to be able to discern, look, examine, and test what we are told, so we can see something that is plausible or not plausible. I'm not saying necessarily truth, but the plausibility of something we should be able to have the tools to tell us this is plausible, this is not plausible, and able to sort of remove at least a large part of the chaff from it. Okay, go ahead. Hand up.
Let me start with like what upsets me about these things about it's called what, verification of truth, is that number one, if you speak against any particular religion, yeah, be it Islam, Christianity, or if you're an atheist where you're talking about, your lack of belief, in YouTube, you're demonetized automatically. So, like, I'm so upset that when it comes to even on Facebook, as you decide to talk about if you are an atheist who is it called anti-religion, anti-theism, you're treated like you and a person who's a terrorist. There's no big difference.
Yeah, but you see, for the social media,
but
the social media censoring, it's about business. It may not be necessarily that the guys in Google believe
listen,
that you're doing the wrong thing. It's the backlash they get as a business.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I understand where Donald Trump is coming from. Yeah, you see, for my understanding of democracy, for democracy to thrive as a concept, it should be from a point of information. But if I'm giving you bullshit and I'm using my platform, say if I'm an owner of Facebook, anything that, if I'm me as the owner of Facebook, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, I decide that anything that comes from Republican is censored. I don't fact check. I just say this is bullshit. The same way that me as an anti-religion person is censored on Facebook, that if I post an anti-religious post, number one, it's so easy for the religious group to get my post pulled down. However, if I post a post on politics, which is based on falsities, the likelihood of it being pulled down depends on whether I am pro-Democrat or pro-Republican. And that is what Donald Trump is against, which for me is a valid cause. Like, honestly, you as a platform, your viewers need to understand that if I'm on Facebook, whatever I'm reading, this is legit.
Oh, you think Donald Trump got that far? You think like he got that far?
One small thing. Martin, before you talk, I'll disagree with the one small thing. The one thing that, actually, right now it's only Twitter that has so far censored him. The one thing that Twitter was talking about is his call to violence against American people.
Not that. It was before Donald Trump.
They never used to call him false news, but they would lower his ratings. But they would never call him false news. They would let all the detractors come in. But
on Twitter,
Twitter has come out really strong. Is these latest things where he's been threatening to call the army on the people, which they are looking at. If they can't allow me and you, the local person, to call for violence, they should not technically allow a president to call for violence. So,
actually, that is not it. That is not the case. Eh? The reason why Twitter is actually that case of that woman who died. The one who Donald Trump called. There's this journalist from MSNBC. He was a former politician. That is actually the case because the widower wrote a letter to Jack Dorsey asking him to pull down that comment. That I think that's what really touched them a lot.
But Twitter, for me,
that was the most influential issue that made them.
That was laissez-faire until recently.
I've always thought Twitter to be one of those platforms that are least regulated as compared to Facebook.
Yes, but
Facebook is one of those posts. It's one of those pages that I had a Nigerian atheist account taken down because he's a Nigerian atheist. Nothing else. However, on Facebook,
the number of reports that they get on something, and they rarely bother to look at whether the merits quality is related to the quality.
Yes, and that is why, and that is because of, and that
will be taken down, regardless.
And that is because of business. That is because of business. The guys in Facebook may be with you, but they're looking at the business aspect of it. Okay.
But you see,
if
right
a lot
now,
of people complain, it means their product, they're complaining about their product. So I think that it's all about money. Losing adverts because people are complaining again in Facebook or Twitter. They are looking at money themselves. People make a lot. That's why an atheist will be banned in Saudi Arabia, but not somewhere in America. We make the same comment because they're looking at business in Saudi Arabia.
But you see, the thing is, for me, initially, I thought that was ridiculous. It just doesn't happen on Facebook. It even happens on YouTube, such that if you, as an atheist, decide to start a channel, your account will be demonetized. And then at the same time, right now, that Donald Trump is proposing that you, as a social media platform owner, you need to be responsible for the content on your platform. Like, you need to fact check. Then they're like coming out saying like, oh no, that's not our business. For me, I'm thinking it's bullshit, because number one, if you fact checked, you not lock down any atheist page. You wouldn't. Their decisions are purely commercial and not based on facts. And they know that if I, as Twitter, I, as YouTube, decided to limit commercial interaction based on facts, is that atheist pages are gonna pass. Whereas these anti-science pages that tell you like, if you want to fight corona, all you need to do is like, number one, hold your nose, and if you can do it for, is it like a minute or so, you're good. That page is gonna be shut down because it's anti-facts. And that is something that these people know, that the moment fact-checking comes in, FIKA SS with his page, with all his numbers, he can go to Facebook and challenge them and tell them, why can't I make money from my page? Whereas this page that is telling people that, come, all ye faithful, we can do this Jesus shit, is monetized, is shit. And that is the biggest fear that these people have, is because for me, as a person who is pro-truth, I think it's ridiculous that an owner of a platform would be opposed to fact checking. What is wrong with that? For me to know that what I'm telling, like if I decide to say SS is a racist, for them to just review this shit and decide that whatever I am saying, as much as I have 300,000 followers, I can ruin SS's career by one tweet. You get? And all Donald Trump is asking is that by the time I tweet that, SS is a fucking, not even racist because we belong to the same, is a sexist or is a misogynist. All they need to do is fact check on the situation. I don't think that's too much to ask.
First of all, about, okay, just a correction, about this Donald Trump thing. He never, Donald Trump is not a very smart person, okay? I don't think he even knows what he did. He's not thinking the way you are thinking, okay? He was hurt by Twitter. He called these guys, told them, how can I hurt them? They told him, do that, okay? I don't think he thought those details you're telling us, it's because that this can happen. He doesn't think that far. That's what you need to know about this guy. He's not that smart. He just asked, how can I hurt these people? They hurt me yesterday. How can I hurt them?
Okay, video.
And they gave him something like, he didn't even read whatever it is was doing. Go and implement that thing.
Okay, let's hear from V. He's been having his hand around for a
while. Two things, FIKA and Trump. So for FIKA, it's been quite interesting for me because most of the things that this conspiracy talk about are things that I engage with professionally. And I might have the presumption of being closer to the facts. But I, as a moderator, having the right to either allow comments to appear on the group or not. I find myself in an interesting place where I know this is wrong. But you see, if I were to act as a gatekeeper, I would be defeating FIKA's purpose itself, because there are people who are in FIKA because they want to know what ideas are out there and engage with these ideas, and they have to go through that process of learning. So by me only trying to feed them what I think is right, I am denying them an opportunity that I had myself when I was still young in FIKA, battling with ideas. So it would be unjust. But I must admit that there are some posts that I just don't allow because I can clearly tell that they don't have any intellectual value. So, but you see, on the larger scale, when you're asking social media platforms to fact check their members, first, it doesn't scale because you see, I only fact check the posts of very few people who have this tendency of being extremely controversial and wrong all the time. So those are the people who I fact check, but I let the majority of people post whatever they want.
But V, can you imagine if you're given the opportunity of fact checking, if number one, is it possible for a virgin to get pregnant? Can you imagine? You see, like for me, this is how I see it. Like this is an opportunity that we have as like a science. If you're taking like an evidence-based approach, just even like a random girl comes, I come and tell you, you know what? I'm supposed to marry you. I've never had sex before, but hey, I am pregnant. In this modern society, who will believe that bullshit?
Well, you have a point, but still, you're not supposed to limit what people talk about.
It's about fact checking.
Yes,
you see, if you go to fact checking, my understanding is like for what has really worked against Donald Trump is that there's been a lot of propaganda. And for elections, I've worked in elections before, yeah? And my biggest challenge was, like what I learned in elections was that there's a lot of propaganda out there. There's no fact checking. And for you to have a proper working democracy, it should be based on truth. You get. However, the current democracies that we have, even in America, whatever they have in place is something that is in place because of propaganda. Like people perfected the art of propaganda, and if you as a social media owner can limit the access of propaganda to the media, you protect democracy, unless you come up with a new form of government.
Before I leave, I have to go. There's a phone call I have to make, but there's something I wanted to say.
Are you in Switzerland?
No. I have to say that sorry? Yeah?
You're in that locale.
You're close.
So
it's fine. You won't judge you. It's fine. Human nature allows us.
Or maybe
I wanted to say that it's not in all instances that what is fact is clear. In fact, there are so many gray areas that even those who have the strongest conviction that they are right, despite having the authority and the intellectual capacity to make more elaborate decisions, they always tend to be wrong. Okay, let's not say always, but more than often they tend to be wrong. So first, yes, it is possible to fact check some things, but it is also possible to be completely in the dark of about what is fact and what is not. The second thing is fact checking doesn't scale unless you sort of automate that process. FIKA has how many thousand people SS right now?
18,000 right now.
Yes.
15.
18.
18,000. And how many moderators do we have?
6.
6 moderators. So
Yeah.
even if we want to moderate, you know, FIKA, we will need, you know, hundreds of moderators.
Not you as FIKA, like that responsibility should be on Facebook. You see, at the end of the day, it's Facebook that is offering people a platform.
Yes, even Facebook itself cannot incur that cost. They
It's true.
can't.
Those motherfuckers are making so much money, like that is negligible amount. For them to tell you that, I'm sorry, if you're a virgin, you've never had sex, you can't get pregnant as a human.
But how many people are on Facebook? We are talking about billions of people.
Exactly. Like
So,
how hard is it for Facebook to fact check that you can't get pregnant as a virgin?
From a program solution, it is very hard.
It is, exactly.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Meanwhile, can we also hear KA? He's been having his hand up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I was actually. So I agree with Kate on some things, but of course I do also agree. Like I think I'd mentioned it earlier. It will be hard for a social media platform to fact check everything that goes through its platform. But that said, I was just thinking about how when you said we should fact check things and all that, I think to some extent, facts will hurt other people's freedoms in the sense that we live in a world where some people are allowed to think that they have worship on Sunday, Saturday, and all that. But the fact is, they shouldn't even be worshiping in the first place. So if you're going to hit people with facts, then I don't think they'd even have certain freedoms in the So I don't know how we'd juggle that.
So your contention is that facts limit freedom.
Yeah, which I don't have a problem with, though. I was just trying to, remind Kay that.
So in a fight between freedom and facts,
Mm-hmm.
do you think should win?
For me, I'd go with fact.
For me, you know what upsets me is that facts are those things that make you super uncomfortable, yeah? Mm-hmm. Especially if you grow up in a world of pseudoscience. And that is what, like, most of us, the way we've grown up, like, number one, you go to a school, like I remember in my high school and my primary school, prayers were deemed to be the paramount key to success. And yet, excuse me, if you're dumb, you're dumb. No matter how much you pray, you can't pass. If you don't get what is a mole concept, you won't pass chemistry. If you're not going to understand integers, you're not going to pass mathematics. If you do not understand these things, no matter how hard, even if you pray fast, whipping yourself every fucking day, you're not going to do it. And like what upsets me, and I think this is one trait I've passed on to my younger sister, which is like, people think she's arrogant, which is not true, is that if you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. You get. There's some things you cannot sit down. If you sit down, I remember even like in high school, when I was in high school, people used to ask me, why don't I pray? Why don't I do this? I was like, to what end? It's not going to make a difference. You get? So I think if we took a facts-based approach, we'd be able to call bullshit. Like I even have religious friends who agree with me that when somebody comes and tells you that my kid used to tail the class from like Form 1 and then in Form 4 they get an A, excuse me, your son or daughter cheated. There's no way you come from being the shitty student to being an A student just at the overnight because you were praying. Like, who the fuck are you?
Okay.
So I think we need to instill a fact-based approach from a young age so that we stop this nonsense of believing that there's magical power somewhere that, you know what, this shit happens, blah, blah, blah. I mean, even if you say that in terms of education, success, economics, etc., that, you know what, Mark Zuckerberg never went to university, Richard Branson never went to university, but fuck it, you don't go to university. Utenda kuuza nyanya hapa hivi Kangemi. You know, you're not going to be that success story like, oh, mimi nilianza kuuza nyanya Kangemi, alafu saizi I'm in the New York Stock Exchange, unless you stole from someone.
I began my corn import and export business with one maize.
Bullshit. You know, it's you see, like for me, I feel so sad that the current generation, the people behind me, the people born between 95 and like 2000 now, they're 20, those are too young. Like 95 to like 1990 maybe to 1995. They tend to think that this, there's this thing that, oh, if you work so hard, like the likes of Sonko, they are an inspiration. I'm like, excuse me, unless you're a thief, I'm sorry, you need to work hard.
Yes.
Like, generation of wealth is a scientific process. You actually, if you want to be a billionaire from scratch, it is a scientific process. If you're a thief, somebody will just come and people are able to show that, oh, for me, Ruth, to get to this level of success, I actually scammed SS a couple of millions, Ngao this, aka, you know. But I can still show that for me to get to my success, this is the route I took. And for you to take it, you're either gonna die or end up in prison.
I don't know why people, why is it difficult to say, you know what, guys, I became rich because I got this inheritance from my parents, or a friend of mine gave me this connection. Why is it difficult? Why do you have to, I don't know why people have to make their story dramatic. I made it on my own. I started with 1,000 shillings. There's nothing wrong in saying, you know what, guys, yeah, I worked hard, but there is this one thing that happened that made me stand out.
Because that's it.
I got this small opportunity.
It's not inspirational. It's not inspirational to tell people that,
no, but
you know what? I used to live in Githurai until my grandparents, my parents died, and then I realized I was rich.
Okay.
No, but you know, it's no longer. No, by the way, no. People want something that they can relate with. Okay, people want something that they can. They want that one person they can relate with. Okay. The problem with a lot of these stories is that they have gaps. Okay. I went to school. Yes. There is something between here and here. How did you achieve? There's something missing there.
I will disagree with you, because I remember there was a time when they showed a guy who apparently used to sell maize, and he bought so many buses as a result of selling maize. And
nonsense.
Sort of agreed with him. So I disagree with that. People really want this kind of, for them, they want this miracle story. It work up. You were selling maize, you bought one packet of njugu, and somehow you became a billionaire selling njugu several years later. And, okay, I don't know how it can happen. But anyway, that's the stories people want.
But you see,
some of them are shameful. Like, you know what? I was banging my boss.
Exactly. You see, for me, I think it's more logical for me to tell people that, maybe for men, maybe they're not. But I think if I banged people to success, that the reason I am where I am, I'm not successful by the way, meaning hustler. But if I was successful because of my ass, trust me, I will tell people I am successful because of my ass.
Nothing. Well, we only have a few people who are that bold thing.
But I think
or do we even have any?
I think it's so unfortunate that if I decide to do legitimate work, that me, you graduate from
What is
campus,
legitimate work
you
even?
get,
Legitimate work. Yeah. Please, let's pick our words carefully.
Let's get the parameters.
So like legitimate work, it means that this is, you see the way you're taught in economics that for you to get success, there's usually like that curve that like a capital,
I can sleep with several different women and eventually get to that curve where I make money.
Yes, you like if you want a sexually transmitted success, you know that for you to get to that place, you have to number one that I have to sleep with anyone who can get me to the next step.
Yep, and I have to choose my customers very nicely.
Thank you.
Any business does.
However, for you to make, for us women, like that is what like in Kenya, it's so skewed such that I don't know. Okay, maybe I assume it's in Kenya, but however, maybe it can be happening in this developed country as well. That's such that myself as a woman, if I am successful, like if I have money, say sina pesa for you, if any of you sina pesa, but ile time ina pesa,
investigate.
but ile siku nitakuwa na pesa, unaweza kusema ati this the only reason that Ruth is akona pesa sababu she slept with this person and this person and this person and this person, and she has slept her way to success. You get? As opposed to that, if I come and tell you that, you know what, I formed a business and this was my business acumen. This is how I run my business for the last 10 years.
Your way through also a business acumen.
Yes, this is what I went through to get to where I am.
Yeah, but
and if I want, you see, the principles of economics should work that if I went through the same and you go through the same shit, you should be able to have the same outcome. However, like in Kenya, we are so, it's our economy is a sham, such that number one, if you're not born rich, you can't succeed. Even if you're as smart as a motherfucker, you still cannot succeed. Unless you're born into the right family with the right connections, or if you're not born in the right family, you have to pay for it. That's nonsense.
You get that lucky break.
What is a lucky? You see, for economics, lucky break doesn't count. It's like for economics to work, it means that all of us, given the same circumstances, will have the same outcome.
No.
Oh, okay. That's an interest.
The problem you have is that you can never have the same circumstances.
Yeah, across the board.
Yes.
But given
but that's the working theory for success in the economic theory.
For the economic theory to work, it means that if you and I were given the same circumstances, our outcomes should be the same. Like you number one, you save 10% of your salary, you spend this X amount on your rent, you spend this amount on your monthly, recurrent expenditure, you do A, B, C, D, like you should be at a particular place at that point in your life. However, in Kenya, what works is that. However, in Kenya, how it works is that, wewe ni mtu wa uhuru? Hapana. Kama si mtu wa uhuru, mbona tukupatie hii pesa?
It's not only Kenya.
Actually, a lot of places.
No, even in the US, it works. However, in the US, the way they say, like the economists from the US believe that America has the perfect economic climate to have the law of consumer and supplier balancing each other out. Just that this is the common belief. That's why they say America is the home of dreams.
America, as much as I don't like America much, I'll admit they do have an advantage over most of us.
Such that
nobody in a particular field, and you manage to get in, you have a chance of succeeding.
Yes.
A high chance. Unlike in Africa, where even if there's nobody in that particular field and you manage to get in, but you're not connected to the right people.
Yeah.
Almost suddenly
kickback city.
Okay, America, the problem would be that if it is a field that is already established, already has its players, getting in as a independent.
Do they even have anything that is niche?
It's almost impossible.
America.
I don't think they have a niche activity.
Field that already has its people. It is
America. My understanding of the US, where people like to go to the US, the US is the hub of capitalism, such that if you have a skill, it is the hub. If you have a skill, you go and you're good at your skill. The only place in the world that you're gonna succeed is US.
Sometimes
it's not just US. A lot of
US actually.
No, in Kenya, my friend, if you have a skill and you're good at your skill, they'll either kill you or they'll do something to just make sure that you're shit.
Yes.
But
even in America,
if you can even find a chance to apply that skill.
In America,
exactly. You'd be...
in America, it tends to be, if you're in a niche market, you're in a market that has not yet been exploited, you're almost guaranteed success. People like Bill Gates, whom we all love to think he wants to kill the whole world.
He does want to kill the whole world, by the way.
Oh, wait. Why?
If you look at him, when he got in, it was a niche market. There was hardly any, there was actually not hardly anybody. There was nobody in that niche. Right? IBM was looking for a possible developer in that niche. Nobody was interested because nobody thought that it could make any sense. And here is a guy in the middle of a garage on top of his parents. Of course, he had to have been in a position where he could actually afford to have a garage on top of his parents to do this stuff.
Exactly.
But besides, there were a lot of kids who were also at that position. But he got lucky in the sense that he had a product which IBM was willing to invest in, and at that time, IBM was not really interested in the profits other than making a name for themselves. So like, okay, you have this, we have this, put them together, let's make some money. They made their own bit, and the side he ran off with it. But if you look at the places where you've had established, even in America, where you've had established, even in the IT field, where you've had established, what do you call them, companies. IBM is still one of the biggest companies in mainframe and mainframe computers. On the microcomputers, where we think all the money is, which is not actually. We hardly ever hear of IBM. Okay, Lenovo has suddenly become big after they bought it. But mainframe and miniframe, IBM is still big. But how many of us hear about mainframe and miniframe? And they still work. But that's a trick I'm making. With America, new fields, you get in well. Old fields, you'll be lucky to get your foot anywhere. In the fields which existed before, which didn't have new investors, the people who invested those years ago are still the people who are running those fields.
I know.
The new
I was reading this book. It's called Bad Blood, about the Ranos. And you know what I thought to myself? If this woman her name was, I think, Elizabeth Holmes, was a black woman like me, she would not have gotten that far. I'm sorry. But the fact she was a blonde, blue-eyed woman selling these bullshit ideas to old, rich white men, she got that far.
Yep.
What was she selling?
Like bullshit, like any person who with a medical degree or with a, not necessarily a medical degree, but a person who understands like biochemistry would have called bullshit on what she was selling. However, the fact that she was a white blonde woman and the venture capitalists were old white men, they were willing to buy into her bullshit because of her appearance, as opposed to if it were me selling the same product that Elizabeth Holmes was selling, I can assure you I would not have gotten as far as she had. And that
I disagree with you on that one. What about televangelists? They are all people of all races, and then they sell the same bullshit.
You see,
they're all building mega churches.
For a televangelist, for you to prosper, if you see, like, number one, you need to know who controls capital. As much as we black people,
I want to go his side. Who are the biggest evangelists around?
I think they're all white, by the way. I don't know them, but I think they're all white.
White rednecks. Those are the biggest. Even the Kenyan fella here associates himself with a white fella so that he can make his own church here, which I feel it. Then he ends up starting this side.
Nakwambia TD Jakes, ukiona the way TD Jakes is popular in Kenya because I think he's black. Yeah. However, TD Jakes, as compared to all those, I'm not
the white people here.
The white people in the Christian industry, they're like, I'm a Billy Graham. He's nothing.
Yes.
TD Jakes and Billy Graham. You can't compare TD Jakes.
No, kwambia, by the way, you see, one thing that I'm realizing the older I get is that me as a black woman, I am more likely to succeed in a predominantly black society as opposed in a white society. Same for any black man. For a black man to be prosperous, you're likely to be prosperous in Africa, which is predominantly black, like Dangote. Dangote is prosperous in Africa, but if he took his business into a Caucasian society, I'm sorry, he's not going to succeed. How are you going to convince those racist white men to buy into this thing that there's a brilliant black man with a brilliant idea?
Who knows cement?
Exactly. And I was just thinking to myself, are there any successful black people in the tech industry abroad?
Even like I think in Kenya, you guys are in tech, SS
no, I think they are.
I'm not exactly in tech, but I know tech.
The secret for the white man is that he knows how to document his bullshit.
Not document.
Yeah, they document their bullshit. For example, who is the oldest man in the? Have you ever heard somebody say the oldest person in the world is a black person? No, because we don't document.
No,
we don't document.
Wait. The person at the Kenya National Museum, Turkana boy,
exactly,
is a black man.
But he will never pick he will never pick get any attention because there is no documentation.
It's not about documentation.
My point is, okay, or even our herbal medicine. They are no peer reviews for them. There is nothing. But that's why you have to document your bullshit. You have to document your bullshit. You have to put some few smart people around it to validate it.
How do you validate BS?
Wait, before you go that route, do you notice one thing? 85% of the world population is in the northern hemisphere. Do you know what 85% of the world population means?
Okay, ukisema northern hemisphere, Africa iko hapo ama haiko?
Yeah.
Africa
is half.
Part of Africa.
I'm sorry to ask this question.
The equator passes in Kenya, so
part of Africa is. But if you think about it, you said 85% of the world's population is in northern hemisphere. What you immediately say is that a huge number of Africans, because half of Africa is not in the northern hemisphere.
Is not?
Yes.
Asia
literally passes in the middle of Africa.
I don't know if I can pull them up right now and measure. Actually, let me do that as you go on.
Appears somewhere in the middle of Africa. And most of sub-Saharan Africa is in the southern part of the hemisphere.
Yeah.
Majority of the black people are in the southern part of the hemisphere.
Mi nakwambia, by the way,
No,
hata mi nakwambia vile hii corona imeanza, I realized that when it comes to racism and hierarchy of like validity of opinions, it goes from if coronavirus started in Africa, you say it started in China. If it started in Africa, trust me, Africa was shut down as early as December 2019.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have affected most of the world if they had done so.
Yeah, but
it's not in Africa.
But the fact that it's in China, and then China, and then after China, Italy. If white people are not affected by coronavirus, like everything would be normal.
No, even if it was only China which is affected, even the other way, because do you realize that 1 in 4 people is Chinese worldwide?
Yeah.
So when China coughs, the world gets a cold.
Mnaitika. Mkikohoa mnaitika.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Because they actually are a major component of thing. But Africa, I think last I checked, about 345 million or something like that.
Are you fucking? You're less than Americans.
Oh, I think we're close to Americans. I can't remember the population, but I remember looking at it and looking like it was such a ridiculous figure.
The older I get, the more I realize that, number one, Africa is a resource. Our opinions, like even if like coronavirus has kind of neutralized to show that whether you are in a developed country or undeveloped country, excuse me, your healthcare is shit. Only that we in Africa, we already knew our healthcare was shit. People in Europe and America were like, oh my God, our healthcare is so great, blah, blah, blah. Then coronavirus happened and they're like, okay. So the person in Migori, the challenges they are facing is the same challenges that the person in Lombardy in Italy is facing. It's the same challenge that the person in New York is facing, that at you're sick. Unaenda kwa hosi unaambiwa, guy, by the way, I'm sorry. Sio ni mbaya. If you die, you die. Sisi tumezoea hapa hivi in Africa.
Okay. Actually, my figures are a bit wrong. Africa is 1.216
billion.
But it accounts for 16% of the world's population and 20% of its land area.
Oh, that's huge.
20%?
Eh.
80%.
80 is huge. 80
is very huge.
We account for
80 is 20%.
Ngoja, ebu unaangalia mapia wapi wewe?
I don't the world surface is very big, and we occupy a very small.
Because I thought Africa is number 2 to Asia.
In population, yes.
In terms of landmass.
Even in landmass, yes.
Yeah.
But number 2, yeah, you're ignoring the fact that who controls the world economy? Asia, Europe, America.
No, it's by then in terms of world economy, it's controlled by, is it America and Europe?
And Asia.
And Asia.
And then no. It's America and Europe. And Asia is up and coming, and that's why like America and Europe are so uncomfortable.
Almost 60% of the American debt. China owns 60% of the American debt.
Yes, I do not dispute that.
You say they're upcoming. They
are already there.
The economy of the people you claim controlling the thing. I mean, you cannot call that upcoming.
Oh, they are FIKA.
Yes.
But see, in terms of Asia, other than China,
but China and India are almost all of Asia.
So nakwambia India, what part of, you see, remember when coronavirus came, ebu cheki wakati COVID ilikuja, Donald Trump had the audacity to threaten India into releasing chloroquine. So what does that tell you about control?
Perhaps let me put it in figures.
No figures, nakwambia Donald Trump aliambia India he's willing to put sanctions if they refuse to sell chloroquine to them.
Yeah, he was willing.
Well, the US is more powerful than India.
If you imagine UK, Uhuru Kenyatta amembia India tutumie chloroquine ama we're going to impose sanctions.
Let's put it this way.
Hata Britain ikambia India hivyo. India will tell middle finger, do whatever you fucking want.
Well, that's because the US is the US, so.
No, it's because economy, as much as you have this debt, whatever ratio, blah, 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 we have these white people who control capital.
Exactly, and that's what makes them the US.
Even in the China, if you go to the people who are behind the capital, those people who are behind that capital are still white.
Yes, but I want us to look at these figures. They are actually extremely, what's the word for it? Surprising.
Mm-hmm.
The GDP of UK is 2.9 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
45
pounds, ama dollars.
USD. You're looking at USD. Okay. The GDP of China is about 13.61 trillion. And the GDP of India is about 2.7 trillion. The GDP of USA is about 20.5 trillion.
Drum roll. Now you know who calls the shots. That's 20 versus 2 and
why you have that kind of figures, this kind of what do you call it, skewed figure
dynamics.
Because these guys have the physical muscle to actually tell the others welcome. However, the interesting part is if you also add on the figures of debt. Now the Eastern world.
But nakwambia ikikuja story ya deni, this is how I look at it. Angalia, even without going to the US, hapa hivi Kenya, if me as a hustler nikiomba 5 million, even 10 million from the bank, these people wanakwanga wakiniongelesha vibaya sana wakati my monthly remittances are due. Na sijalipa. However, wewe kama EABL, if you owe billions, who do they treat better?
Oh, I don't know.
Billions, of course.
Thank you. So at the end of the day, yes, I owe you a lot of money, but mimi ndo na dictate vile nitakulipa. There's no way you, unajua nikisema sikulipi na sina hiyo pesa, you know I can collapse your bank.
Oh, yes.
There's nothing you can do about it. Ukisema ninaku 10 billion na nikwambie silipi, fanya kile unadu na hiyo pesa sina, utafanya? You can even file for bankruptcy.
Now,
na hiyo nilikula pesa yako. I have done my own shit that is worthless to you.
By the way, when we speak about the nice GDP of USA, please note of that GDP, China owns 1.1 trillion as debt. That is what America owes China.
And what does China owe America? Because I'm assuming China also owes some monies.
Actually, jeez. Actually,
China has no debt.
Actually,
I doubt it. China debt, America.
China debt to US.
How much? Why don't they say how much it owes USA? Interesting. They're willing to say how much.
Okay, like
Maybe it's a power play.
Only landlords. Oh, madeni.
It's how much does China owe?
That's what I looked for. How much does China owe USA?
I can't also find anything about that.
Because like when it comes to when it comes to racism.
No, China owes about 1.1 trillion in US debt.
Yes, but how much does the US own China?
Or US own China?
Yes.
US owes China.
Oh, that's a lot. It's more.
We know what US owes China.
How much does
$1 trillion
owe US?
Exactly, that's what we're looking at. Martin, you got that mixed up.
No, China owes. Which figure are you looking for?
China
owes US.
What US owes China?
Yes.
Okay.
1.1.
There's an article here.
How much does China owe US?
China
We
owes
don't know.
about 1.1 trillion in US debt.
No.
No.
Owned 1.1 trillion in US debt. Owned.
Oh.
Which means the US owes China that much.
China, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how much does China owe the US?
They've hidden the internet from us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I can't find anything about that. Let's see.
I'm finding something which is.
China is ponyo.
But I don't know. I feel like they do owe some monies. I mean, everyone owes everyone.
No, me not sure. You see, for me, like right now, the only way that you can fight racism is if Africa gets to self-sustenance levels, that we have good hospitals, good education, that is Afrocentric. Actually, nonsense like Ati. Now as an adult, I think it's actually ridiculous that we used to be punished as kids for not speaking proper English. I'm like, ni kama kwenda US, people are being punished for not speaking Swahili, which never happens.
Oh, have you heard today? They want to introduce Chinese.
Nimesikia, I'm like ati competence-based. I'm like, watu wa China wangapi wanajua Kiswahili?
I thought there's a lot of Chinese speakers in the world, so
here's the thing.
All those Chinese speakers are in China.
One in four.
It's not my business. I'm not the one who is going to China. It's not my business to learn it. If they come here, let them learn Swahili.
But you see, Martin, okay, just a moment. I think we shouldn't get emotional about this one because they've established themselves to be able to dominate the world like that. So using their language benefits you more than them trying to learn Swahili. They conduct their business in Chinese and all that. Yeah.
You see, AKA, this has been my logic right now, is that number one, we have technology, right? Technology, which gonna Google
Translate.
My understanding of how it works is that I should be able to communicate to you without necessarily learning your language. And the same way, you're supposed to be able to communicate to me without learning my language. So why, if you know the way you see, like in SA, you can, like, for me, I think South Africans, black South Africans, people from these countries that got their independence later,
in the 90s.
Their concept of independence is very different from ours. Like in South Africa, they are not apologetic for not knowing English. They're like, you know English, fuck you, ni sawa, we don't give a shit. Excuse me, I did a whole year in Dar es Salaam, yeah? My year in Dar es Salaam, what it taught me was that for you to do business in TZ, fucking know Swahili. You get?
Yeah. It's not fair. Like, the Chinese are using
you can't come
time.
here and say that language is a barrier. It is not.
So yeah, Chinese children are using their time, learn useful things like science and engineering. We are dedicating time here for our children
to learn
Chinese, to spare time in our education system, when we could be using that time on much more useful thing. That kind of sounds unfair. And you know how Chinese is difficult.
Me, I had an argument with a Danish guy, and I told him, number one, you cannot come and tell me that for me to learn engineering or medicine, I have to learn English in order to understand it. Excuse me. When it comes to anatomy of the body,
do you think you
actually you do?
You do, because of how
Nakwambia, like my experience in Dar es Salaam, what it made me learn was that, number one, if you wanted to know anatomy of the body, yeah? In English we say eyes, in Swahili we say macho, right? What is so difficult for you to tell me that haya ni macho na yanatazama namna hii? Like for them,
because of the I don't know how to call it, the way the language is structured.
Like if you want to pass knowledge, this has always been my position. If you want to pass knowledge, language in this era of technology should not be a barrier.
It will be, especially if you see how Google Translate is very deficient.
Like for you, not Google Translate. You see, for TZ, they even know the Swahili word for a flash disk. Flash disk.
I didn't know that.
You know, like for a Tanzanian, for me to describe a vein, they know how to do it. And then
what do they call a vein? Mishipa. A vein is mishipa, right?
Apana, mishipa. Okay, sijui. Okay, let me not.
What is a vein? What is an artery?
Mimi sikufanya biology huko, mimi naenda kusoma vitu
vingine. Gentlemen and lady, there's only one lady here. I really need to shut this one down.
Tutaendelea next weekend.
Next weekend. As a final conclusion, I finally found out something interesting about the Chinese debt, which we didn't know. Net debt between USA and China, 170 billion.
In favor of
China.
Oh,
that's a very small figure.
Pesa kidogo, yote Donald Trump akisema nalipa atawapatia pesa yake.
The second person to have debt of China net, you are looking plus minus the US rather. The nearest competitor to that is Japan at 300.
Japan?
Yes, at 315 billion. So when you say 920 billion is small, 970 billion is small, it is.
That
is 370 billion about.
But anyway, Wachina wajaipata wakaja tuambia ati mimi niko na pesa yako utafanya? Utadu?
When war breaks out,
Ati wao tutawaambia kuja mtue sisi wote ni sawa tu, by the way ni sawa. We have no.
The amusing thing is that Singapore and India are at a zero debt ratio with the USA. In the sense that they are owed as much as they owe. Countries, India and Singapore.
Sasa,
owe as much as they are owed.
So, SS, if I was to leave this country of Kenya, niende wapi ndio niache kuwa maskini?
India.
Definitely not the US or America.
India kuna nuka, siwezi enda huko. Acha nikaa huko.
Nataka pesa, nataka kunuka vizuri.
Nataka pesa lakini usienda. Hakuna haja, unajua ukiwa na pesa kama unanuka, watu watakaiva kuangalia like, ai acha hiyo pesa.
Hata ukinuka vipi na uko na pesa, watu watakukaribia.
Hakuna jaribu.
Actually,
Nakwambia, I've been reading articles of Asians and white people complaining how white privilege has gone down thanks to coronavirus. Ati Africans, like they're complaining that we black people are discriminating against them because we're like, ati kuna mzungu akipita unasema corona jifichi. And I'm like, yeah, what is it?
We are doing that, and then what are we doing next? We are going to them and saying, hey, can we have some money to sort out corona?
See, no, as much no.
Okay, your internet is everywhere. Or is it mine? Okay. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, I can.
The internet that has gone everywhere.
Oh.
Because I'm noticing she's even gone off. It looks like it's gone everywhere. Okay, gentlemen, now that you're only gentlemen, we need to end this. See you next Friday. Hopefully we'll discuss something else, or if there's anything holding, we can talk. However, if you have, like before Friday, if you have an idea that we should discuss this topic, you can send me a message and
hello.
Right, gentlemen, see you next Friday. Apparently we have internet problems. We'll decide what we're going to do for next Friday. Bye.
Bye.